Good morning, my babushka manushkas. My baby girl. What's the word? I don't remember what I was going to say. Where am I? Oh. I guess the busy day. Busy. As you see, I have 12 to-dos. I intend to do all of them. But I thought I felt to but as we know, I usually can't. So if I can do half of them, I'll be very happy. Some of these I started, some of these I didn't. Especially the cleaning I need to do at some point before I can stream it again later tonight. But yeah. Yeah. We're thriving. Definitely. Yeah, busy. Let's see, music. Oh, there was a new Lo-Fi Girl update. I wonder if they updated this at all. I think they did because I think there's more here than was before. Actually, no. No, they did not update this. But they did update, I've decided again, we're not doing that. Okay. But there was a big Lo-Fi Girl update for them. Oh, he does VTuber stuff now. Oh, they're on VGen. Okay. Follow. Looks like. Oh, that's my AC house. Okay. We have a timer. When I actually start everything. I'm not starting everything yet. Oh, hi, DG. Yes, comfy stream time. I'll show you guys what I'm doing when I eventually get there. I get to that point. Prototyping. Working on many different things today. So hungry. Hiya. I also have to use the restroom. I'm trying to find. I have to find something first. Beep boop. Boop beep. Boop 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 ba. Am I doing? Oh, I have to go find my fucking. What's it called? My freaking. Called. Um. Notebooks. My notebook. So. But I wanted to put something on. That's right. I was going to put something on for us to watch. I'll probably watch some game dev videos because I need to do that. But I'll be really, really quick right back. I just have to use it. I hate going over your beer already, but I'll be right back. All right, terrible news. I don't. But I shall find it right now. It's at my desk. It should be at my desk. Why it would not be at my Hmm. Hmm. Think. Right. Could be. Unless. Daeva. Lumindaeva. Where did you notebook? All three, though they must be together. No, I clicked. I think. No. No, all three. They're not forever lost. Let's hope not, DG, because those have every single note for the concept of this game. All my planning is in there. I was going to switch it all over to Notion today. So, keep the bad energy out. I'm only guessing that. I'm not sitting at my desk. Found an extra sketchbook. I was supposed to organize my desk? It's tossing things here. Yeah, glitch. Like, there's. Okay. Has to be. I think. Promise. It's not. Actually. Hold on. It actually might be in Boston. In which case we'll just start from 0. I have enough written down, but I think it actually might be lost in Boston. Hold on. The thing is I know they didn't toss it because they can't do that. One of our hoods. Gracious. Okay, I realized I was talking while being muted. So I'm looking around my room. I'm like 98% certain I left it there because well, I wasn't talking for that long. I'm 98% certain I left it there because I literally can't find them anywhere. Not that they were like completely filled. Like one of the notebooks I had just started, and it was only like the refined ideas that I wrote down. And honestly, some of it I would have had to scrap anyways. After getting my feedback. I just showed my mom, and I'll show you guys. This is like 1% of the information that would have been in there, and like it just had like random ideas in there too. Which thankfully I have the most important stuff down. Like if I had lost, let's see if it will show. No, because it's on the wrong window. If I had lost all of this, which you can't really see it because it's in that view because of my fucking task list. If I had lost all this, I'd cry. And there's even drop downs that you can't really see because of the thing, but there's drop downs here. Like, if I lost this, I'd be pissed. Thankfully, all this is in here. There's even resources there. I have all this stuff here that's all current, thankfully, but I would have been so pissed. Yeah, so I usually copy it over after I do it. It's just some of the stuff, it was just like ideas and stuff that I hadn't like decided on or not. Like I had 3 notebooks. One was my game dev learning notebook. That was like every note I took on everything I was learning for game development is in there. Well, except for thankfully not my Godot learning. My Godot learning I've been doing on my iPad, which I have to go grab in a bit when I do some Godot learnings in a bit. Yeah, those ones are in there, thankfully. But every other piece of like the game development process, every time I planned out features, thankfully my to-do list is pretty, let me see, I'll show this one. Thankfully, I did this, so this is this or whatever. Thankfully stuff like, I started this, let's see. Where is it? Oh, for this, for example, prototyping. Thankfully, I listed out everything I was going to test. And then thankfully, my game Bible is so extensive that there's no way I wrote down all of this. Is that the Vincent? Thank you, Vincent. I'll take your sub. I appreciate it. And then I started making ideas lists because I just didn't have my notebooks with me. Okay, bye. And then thankfully there's no script or anything in there. The plots and everything aren't fully fleshed out either. I have like, I think in one of them is like a rough idea of how the story will flow, but I changed it, I think. So yeah, we're actually not going to be doing this. We're going to keep it to fucking Blender for this fucking. So yeah. Yeah. So I'm a little stressed, but they said they'll call me back. If they don't call me back, we're under the same management company. I will literally message whoever I can find that's over there and be like, hey, I stayed there with my coworker, who you can also find in our company email. I was like, where the fuck's my shit? But since they're notebooks, they're not something someone would steal. Like, oh, you can't really see it because of the thingy. They're not something someone would steal because, I mean, sure, someone might see the ideas, but like, doesn't really mean a lot without execution or everything. Which maybe someone can execute it, but I don't think I'm not that worried about it because it's me we're talking about. And yeah, so I'm just more upset that I'm most likely gonna have to go into the city on Friday. I don't want to. That's not part of my plan. But I might have to. So, that's where we're at right now. Thankfully, I was taking notes at work. I have a lot of notes, and then I'll copy them over, and I'm putting them in a binder. You can't really lose a binder. We would think. I think the notebook had my scope. Yeah, it had my full scope and all the characters I was going to include. Like, don't look for me in the city. You don't even know which city I'm talking about. Thankfully, I have a rough enough idea of what the scope was that I'll write it down again. I don't think it's anywhere that I can reach. But yeah, I set up a ton of papers to do. I planned out all my to-dos for the current phase of game dev I'm in. So I have to do those. I have to do some courses. You'll notice some stuff I used to do in my to-dos for today. I have to develop the rough art concepts. So I'm doing a sketching everything course and then a painting everything course. But Lumin, what game will you make? What do you mean, what game will I make? My cat just scared me. I haven't even outlined anything. What are you talking about? NDA? Who's under an NDA? You don't know shit, Vincent. You don't even know its name. And PayPal, wow. Melzy, you've been here when I talked about my game. Lumindaeva got scammed. See, it's not even under Lumindaeva, so you're already wrong. I also made a rough roadmap. I think I mentioned it. If you have the role in server, I mentioned that I was gonna make a roadmap because for those who haven't seen, well, I can share this. A cute adventure exploration game. What server? The server that you have to redeem Discord server for. I'm gonna update the channel in there. Yeah, the game directory channel, and then I'll start actually putting. I have to update the directory thingy for Dola, or I just said the name. I'm gonna probably change it actually into a different kind of thing. I haven't decided yet. I feel like no. Oh, maybe. Yeah, I'm probably gonna change game directory into being a forum channel. I'm gonna make a forum channel for it. Because there's a few different game ideas I have. Nobody's gonna link it. I have to send you it, Melzy. Not scammed. Oh my goodness. Vincent, you know nothing. Melzy knows more than Vincent does. And Melzy is as impatient as my little brothers, and they are both under 16 years old. Now, I'm taking your points. Let's see. Yeah, I have to update this. What was I gonna show? What was I gonna show? I forget. I already lost my train of thought. Yeah, I need to update that, and then I'm making. Oh, that's what I was gonna show. There you go. Paralyze has like they have a Notion. And I've been using it to like sort of plan out my roadmap and ideas. Just because since it's only the first chapter, similar to how Poppy Playtime's multiple chapters, I won't have this much stuff. But I'm gonna make a little roadmap because I'm doing it both for chat to see and follow along as we make through the game development stuff. But also my family's curious about it for personal reasons that you would not think of. Or you would not guess. But yeah, so I'm gonna lock in, do some notes. For breaks, we're gonna play Paralives, funnily enough. Just 'cause it's chill like that. But any plan for today. Let me put my ringer on. My family actually responded to me. Like this. Oh, and I was pulling up something for us to watch. While I do this, I think I just said we were gonna watch game dev videos. I was wondering why my hand was so cold. It was next to my fucking, what's it called? The sherbet I have. No. You're very capable, but it's a very, one, I want to learn game dev on my own. Two, it's a very personal project to me because I've had other people offer. I don't even know if you're being serious or not, but I'll address it like it's serious. I've had people offer, but the thing is, one, this is my first ever project, so I want to do it completely solo. Two, it's a very personal project to me. Now, there are future game ideas I have, which I can show if anyone's curious. And that's why I want to make this a forum, because there's like a few. Because like I said, we're only making, I'm ignoring Vincent. I'm only making the chapter one of it, so it's just one biome, one story arc. And then I'm going to develop some side games. Whether they get fully developed and shipped, I don't know yet, but I'm going to develop some other games at least to the alpha beta phase, hopefully, ideally. And then I'll revisit it in full. Well, Melzy, no offense, and I will go there. The fact I'm making a game to deal with my personal grief regarding my dead aunt, I don't want anyone else dealing with it. Does that end the conversation about it? Will that end the conversation about it? For the record, because I know Vincent doesn't read my pings on my server, I just had a family member die this past weekend, so no. Anyways, with that out of the way, what was I saying? Yeah, we've been playing Paralives. Oh yeah, I have some other game ideas that I was setting up. That was also part of my notes. Yeah, yeah, I figured you have servers muted. That's why I said you wouldn't have seen it. So I said you ignored it. This isn't a slight on you, I'm just saying a fact. So I don't push people. You don't know what they're going through, ever. No offense, but I'm not reaching out to anyone while I'm going through that. I'm barely streaming. So, part time. Yeah, there's a few game ideas in here that I forgot about. So I was looking through my list. I haven't sent you any TikToks. And I could have. I've purposely not sent you TikToks. Because I've been in my feelings. Not about you. Been in my feelings. Dying. So there's the horror game that I'm gonna make because my hotel is scary. I took reference pictures. I have there's some that are just working titles. There's Welcome to Audacia, which I did almost make. That one's a 2D 2D pixel no, not life sim. It's a murder mystery. I might do a game jam. I'm probably not gonna be able to do 2027. I'll probably do 2028. Actually, I might do a 2027 one. There's this game jam called Yandere Game Jam. I was gonna make something for that and try a game jam. I think oh, it's in August. I signed up for a game jam. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but it's there. There's this one. It's called Untitled The Office. I don't remember coming up with this idea. But it says 2D pixel RPG based on The Office, 1 year in game. I don't know how that's gonna work. There's a space-based farming sim, pirate RPG, mage school. This one is a big one that I won't go into because it's gonna dox me. And then full release of Dola. So this is our roadmap right now of ideas. And I'll probably get more ideas. And not all of them will be feasible. And that's okay. Meow, 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 meow. So that's all of those. New version of Notion install now. Okay, so I have to continue these notes. I figured out, or I'm making an ability tree, or I have to pick out some abilities. Because I was like zooming at work today and I did a ton of stuff. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 7 pages front and back of stuff that I was writing on pieces of paper, like 8 by 11 pieces of paper that I was writing stuff on. Let me put this on. I did say Friday I would start because that's when I can stream with that persona, but Friday we'll start fully prototyping was the plan. I don't know if it's the plan anymore. I might start sooner, but either way, we'll be chilling. We'll be fully doing game dev streams Friday. For now, we're doing learning. But who knows? Maybe we'll at least set up the prototype stuff today. The first prototype stuff today. And go over it. But I'm trying to find... Ooh. Save to watch later. What am I looking? Oh, is my history? No. No, it's not. Okay. In my playlist? Oh, you guys can't see what I'm looking at. Yeah, I'm a mess. I haven't properly slept in days, and before you guys go, Lumin, you should sleep. I would, however, like I said, I took my medicine. I think I took it at midnight. 12:37 is when I took it. And I've been zooming since. And then I chugged a coffee before I left work. Which thank goodness, because I drove my car. Vincent might hate me for this. I really hope he left by now. I drove my car and it had less than a quarter of a tank. And I had over 30 miles to go. And I've never seen my gas light go off. I was like, oh, let's see if I texted my family because I have no money. As we all know, I have $0 in my bank account. I was like, Mama. I was like, let's see if my gas light works. Still no gas light has come on, and obviously I got home. Stressed everyone out, including myself, and I had to take the back roads, and I was like, it was very scary. We'll watch all of these. Can I add all to queue? No. What this? If I add this, my queue, then go to my queue. Yep, knew that would do that. That's the top. Up. That. There we go. Block in chat.
It's kind of fun.
That loud.
Designing trees. This one looks
Fine.
so weird. This one. Alright. Right click. Oh, it appears.
Oh, but yeah, I think Melty joined the server. If you're in the server, well, it tells you when you join.
It's Rui. I'm thinking of
Which roles to
changing my
get, so you'll be
room
fine.
layout, but I honestly can't think of a better layout than this. Okay, I have an idea. I'm thinking I move.
You see it? There you go. Alright, I have to edit that,
So
but
just
that's what it looks like right now.
where the bed is, basically. And then as to where I'm putting the bed, that's a good question. We'll find out. Okay. I'm feeling the burn. She's doing it. Oh, it's so dark in here today. Oh. Ow. Stubbed my toe. That was bound to happen. Okay. I guess I'll try this out for now. let me share with y'all the progress I've made since last time we checked in about my mini game. Oh wow. So as a refresher, my idea is to make a picking up fall leaves type of game. And originally my design, I was gonna use some typical fall colors, so like orange, green, brown, etc. But then a couple nights ago, I was just staring at my YouTube channel, as every YouTube creator does. I don't think they all do this. But anyways, I was staring at my YouTube channel and I recently drew a new channel banner, which is in my typical art style, which I would describe as, I guess, almost monochrome. The key elements that I think the color matters, I only use a pop of color for those.
Does this have ink? We'll find out.
So I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool
Alright, let me
to
start
use
my
that aesthetic for my minigame? Especially because it has kind of similar themes going on.
45
with my
minutes.
channel banner. My
Lego.
banner even has my OC, which is going to be in this game. I guess for that reason I took direct inspiration. But anyways, I was able to populate the floor with a bunch of these little grass pieces, which are now swaying nicely in the wind. Although the swaying motion is just kind of like rocking back and forth. It's because I use a sine function, or did I use cosine? I don't remember, but either way, it's gonna be the same movement. I guess ideally it would be moving in like a gust of wind, then stops, gust of wind, and then stops. But hey, I'm satisfied with this for now. And another big thing is I can now click to move my character around, although right now it's a placeholder character. Yeah. Today what I want to do is make the tree in Blender. So today's a little 3D modeling kind of.
Oh yeah, we'll be doing Blender tutorials again soon when I'm fully in game dev mode.
This is my original sketch. Well, I
Prayers.
changed the colors a bit. I do want to first sketch out another tree. So.
And I'll show you guys my other digital tech projects I'm thinking about working on. Yay. You should have a physical to-do list. I didn't write one today. I don't know where my thing is.
Okay, so I have my reference photo here. I also have the reference photo without the leaves. And of course, I have my cube. So first, I think I'll start by making the bark, make the main trunk. Actually, maybe I want a cylinder for this. What does a cylinder look like? I don't want it to have too many vertices. Maybe like, I don't know, 6. And then I want to loop cut it right about there. The nice thing is that
oh, you myself pretty face. Yeah.
Exact with the geometry. It's not supposed to be symmetrical.
You guys can blame Vincent for that.
Actually, it might look better if
I have
don't
this.
try to make it look too perfect. You know what I mean? I'll use extrude this time for no particular reason. Move it over. I believe I can merge these vertices.
I forgot this was something I wanted to do.
Little point. That's one main branch kind of done. Now obviously I don't want all the branches to just like be
We're planning a
flat
ton of different things right now.
axis,
Hold on. My
these
brain's
axes.
everywhere.
But
Andromeda.
no, this is my first
I'm
time
gonna kick your ass. Get the fuck
designing
out
a
of here.
tree, okay? It's not really, I wouldn't really call myself a
Ay,
tree designer by trade. So I hope you guys cut me some slack there.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna
You're
make
fine.
it flat for now. And then
Are you
I'll
being
move
dramatic?
the branches
Yes.
to be a bit
It's in
more
your name.
three-dimensional. Okay, and then here I'm gonna use.
Why do I have a calculus text? I know why I have a calculus.
Whoa, I didn't mean to create this like weird bend in the tree, but I kind of like it. I'll take these faces.
Need this.
Okay.
Alright, there should be another one over there.
A tree surgeon. That's approximately good enough. Anybody else not really like using hotkeys? I don't know.
Ooh,
I
this would be
just
helpful.
very much prefer clicking on buttons. But at some point,
Let
I'm
me
sure
put my
I'll have to
shit.
learn the hotkeys because it's gonna be much more efficient.
What?
I'm a little worried about what this is gonna look like once I start
Reference.
moving the branches around to look more 3D. But oh, we always knew that that would be a problem. Okay, I cut a really funky shape on accident, but I feel like that's fine. It's a tree. Trees are kind of funky, and I think it doesn't look too bad. This is what it looks like without the image.
Oh, you documented there. Holy shit.
I think the way I'll do this is I'll turn on
What's this?
proportional editing. Let's see. Ooh, okay.
Okay.
Whoa.
Those can go there.
Okay, now it's not completely flat. What if I rotate a bit?
Or
Ooh, That's cool.
I'm looking for.
I like it.
Fixed.
This one looks so weird. This one. Alright, you know what? I'm gonna tweak it a bit.
Look. About perhaps
You know what? Not bad. It definitely has its
things that
weird
makes
angles. Like this is not one of them. There's a front and back to this tree. I think that's fine though. I'm gonna see if it's easier to make the bark by doing a different method than what I did with the branches. I'm gonna try extruding them out in all different directions from the beginning. It's so satisfying merging vertices.
was Andromeda was
The
being
roots over here a little thicker.
Hey yeah.
I'm
Okay.
happy with it.
Two. There's three
I'll
more.
be
I need.
honest, I think I prefer the previous layout of my room over this one. But I'm still gonna keep it how it is for at least another week. I liked the placement of the bed and the desk where it was previously. It was just more convenient. But at the same time, now I have all this room over here. I have all this room freed up. Previous layout, I didn't have as much space to just like stand around in the room. So that is a plus. And I don't know, maybe it's not too bad that things are a little bit more inconvenient in this layout. For example, now I can't turn off the light from my bed. Before, my lamp was like right next to my bed, so I could just reach over while laying down and turn off the light, but now I can't do that. So that's a little inconvenient, but maybe that's a good kind of inconvenient. Maybe because turning off the light is a slightly bigger decision now, that will make me sleep better. Because now maybe my brain will be like, oh, she got up to turn off the light. That's a big deal. That means she's serious about it being sleep time. Anyways, let's pick up where we left off with my designer blender tree. So I think it's time to add in the leaf blobs.
I'll find the other two eventually.
This away a little bit.
Okay.
Sorry, there's a lot of noises going on. Oh, it looks so weird. Doesn't look like a sphere at all at this point. I feel like 6 is kind of appropriate. That's my tree, honestly. Kind of gets the point across. So I want it to be a little flatter on that axis, and that's about it. I think that's what I want my blobs to look like. So I have a bigger blob over here. Now the branches have moved around, so I need to figure out where I want to place these on this new, more 3D tree. This blob I want it to be on this branch here. Okay, this one I think I meant
Game Bible.
This branch, maybe a little lower. And this one is gonna be on this branch for the most part.
No, wrong one. Overview.
Okay, not that big. I want this blob to be a little bigger. Maybe I'll move it in just slightly, out this way slightly. Let me go back and adjust this one again. I think I want it lower down. I'll just make this a little bigger and move it this way a little bit. Wow, I'm happy with it. I joined them. I hope that's what I was supposed to do. I'll name this Leaves. I want to see what happens now when I try to import it to Blender.
Okay, I have to redo this.
When everything comes crashing down. I don't know what all this is, but let's see. Whoa. I forgot to take the sizing into consideration. Actually, the sizing it's not as big a problem as I thought originally. Okay, I think I should go back to Blender to color the leaves, but let's just give it a color for now, just to see how it looks. Something is still off about it, and I don't know exactly what. Maybe it's the fact that all the blobs are kind of facing the same direction. Also, I can just walk through the tree as of this moment. But it's nice that there's a tree now. Hee hee hee. I can hide behind the tree. I'm gonna be reading this book to go to sleep. I'm literally so close to finishing it.
And it's gonna run 4 minutes apparently because there's no way an hour has passed already. Holy shit.
Very last spurt, so I didn't finish it yet. And I know this is the second vlog in a row that I'm reading a book to go to sleep, and everyone must be thinking, oh my god, she's such an intellectual, she's so well read. I'm sure that's what you guys are thinking, but no. Normally I would be doom scrolling and watching videos and Twitch before going to sleep, but I am actively trying to do less of that. I decided to give myself a cap of 1 hour max of that kind of stuff in a day, just because it was getting out of hand. So instead, my cool down activity for tonight shall be finishing this book. Am I wearing the same sweater as in the last clip? Well, it is another day, actually another night, and tonight I want to figure out how to make the leaves that fall from the tree appear on the ground, because this is a picking up leaves type of game. Remember? I think I want to do some basic planning because there's a lot I need to figure out. Are we all seeing this right now? We have the tree, we have the character, and then we have the leaves that fall from the tree. Okay, so what's important here? So the first thing I need to figure out is how to make the leaves appear. How to make a single leaf appear. That's right, we're starting from there. Figure out how to generate a leaf on a spot on the ground after X time passes. And draw a little leaf just for emotional support. Okay, another thing I need to figure out is how to generate multiple leaves on random spots in area over a certain time. So I want these leaves to appear like periodically. So I'll change that to periodically. I mean,
Yeah, this is why I should have consulted my game
leaves
Bible first.
just
Holy
to
shit, I forgot
add a
some of this.
visual, you know? Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you can't see the bottom. Couldn't see my beautiful artwork right there. And then number 5, question mark, is maybe I have a max number of leaves that can be on the ground at one time. So if you have 5 leaves on the ground, then no more leaves generate past that. I'm sure more stuff will come up, but for now we're starting with step 1. How do I make a leaf generate on a spot? I know how to like set up a scene so that an object is like in the scene when you start the game, but I haven't done this yet. I haven't like created an object in the game after it started. So let me figure that out first and we'll take it from there. By the way, this is what my game looks like as of now. Oh, I forgot I changed the perspective. But look at my tree. It sways in the wind now. I wanted the leaf blobs to kind of distort when they're swaying in the wind, and I was able to get a look that I'm happy with. I did basically what I did for the grass, although I did have to change some things because the grass here, these guys are just 2D. They have no side profile, but this is 3D. So I had to make some adjustments and it took a little bit of work, but I got it working. Also, I think these are the 2 perspectives that I think I'm gonna be considering. So let me know what you think. Let me know what your preference is. So number 1 is this one. Camera follows the player. This is like a regular, I forget what it's called, regular perspective view, right? It looks all 3D-ish. I would also have the camera be able to rotate, so like you can turn the camera around when you're back there. But yeah, so that's option 1, and this is option 2. This is a orthogonal view. I feel like this view looks better when the camera's not like moving with the player and just stays still. They each have their own charm, so I feel conflicted. Like the first one feels more interactive, I guess, but the second one feels kind of charming and toony. It also feels kind of zoomed out more. You can see more of the world at once. Okay, I think I might have a bias for this one, but I still want to hear what you guys think. Alright, so first I'm gonna set up a placeholder for the leaf. I'll put a box. Let me give it some kind of color. Okay, green box. I'm gonna call it leaf. So how do I generate leaf? Okay, I searched on YouTube, generate random, Godot 3D, and this looks relevant. How to spawn objects in random positions in 3D. So let me give it a look. So I need to instantiate method the leaf to make it exist, and then I have to add child it to add it to the world, and then I set the position of this new leaf to whatever position. Alright, well, let's try it out. Also, this guy explained it very well, so I appreciate that. I appreciate a good tutorial. I also want to read the docs from Godot, just so I understand better. Okay, I think this was the wrong page. Okay, I think this is the right page. Okay, I think this is how I'm supposed to do it. I have it right now so that if I right click, the leaf should appear at this coordinate that I put. All right, right click. Oh, it appeared. That's a big ass leaf. Okay, let me make the leaf smaller. Tiny leaf. Okay, sorry, I was locked in for a bit. Forgot to record. This time I'm gonna try to spawn a leaf in a random spot in this region where the player can walk around. So let's see if it works. Now let me, if I right click. What about again? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, it works. Although one of them spawned in the tree. That might be a problem. Oh, I see. If I also spawn them behind the tree, that might also be a problem. But oh my god, it kind of worked. Okay, it took me a bit to figure out how to even do this because tell me why. I was reading docs. I was trying to use this get bounds on my navigation region to try to figure out like the area to spawn the leaves in, but it doesn't work. I ended up using this get vertices on the navigation mesh. I feel like the way I did it is not very elegant. Like if my area is anything other than a simple square, I feel like this method doesn't work really well. But for tonight, I learned some new things. And if we go back to what I wrote earlier, I was able to do number 1 for the most part. Oh, I didn't do after X time passes. Let's figure that out real quick. I'm also gonna watch this video real quick. Thank you, DevWorm. I'm not spawning enemies, but I do want to learn more about spawning. I feel like that's relevant, right? Because I'm spawning leaves. So I think I'll be using a timer to make the leaves appear after a given time. Just kind of makes sense, I think. So let me just, as a refresher, read up again the docs on timers. Okay, so I set the timer to 5 seconds. So now I think, if I wrote this correctly, when the time runs out, a leaf will spawn and then I'll restart the timer. There will be a new leaf every 5 seconds in a random spot. Fingers crossed. There's a leaf. Why is it so slow? I know, now I feel like it's correct. Maybe they just spawn in areas that you can't see. Okay, it's working. They look kind of like little peas. All right, we have ticked off number 1 and number 2. Yay. I think one thing to add is regarding the area, update the area maybe. That might be something I want to do so that we don't have these little pea leaves generating behind and into the tree. Also, it's getting crowded real fast, so maybe that number 5 is not a question mark. We do need a max number of leaves on the ground. But honestly, maybe once I design the leaves to look like leaves and not peas, it might look kind of nice to have a bunch of them all over the ground. Also, I want to have little particles raining down from the tree, so it looks like they're falling and not just appearing on the ground. But that will be for next time. I try to show more of the behind the scenes and nitty-gritty of me learning game dev and making my mini game in this vlog, so I hope you enjoyed that. I didn't include as much of this stuff in the past vlogs just because I thought honestly like it might bore some of you guys, and I also want to make sure everyone feels like they can be part of the discussion about the video, even if you don't know like technical stuff. But I've been getting quite a few comments from people who are also interested in game dev, which is super cool. Also, there's been discussion about the use of AI tools to help with learning. Me personally, I'm not using ChatGPT to learn game dev, although these days when you Google search, sometimes you get like an AI summary at the top of your search results. So I do look at that when it pops up. But I don't know, should I try using ChatGPT and see if it helps me? I just want to go type in Google and click on the links the old-fashioned way. That's how people do it back in my day. But anyways, I find what's most useful for me is, as you saw, I watch a lot of YouTube tutorials of other people building stuff. That's probably the most useful for me. That and reading the official documentation. Those two are the most useful for me. And then third would be reading forum posts, and the rest is just a lot of trial and error. I will say that the way that I learn is not the most efficient, and it's also pretty messy. A lot of times I end up having to like relearn better ways of doing things that I did kind of poorly before, but honestly, that's just how I like to learn. And I feel like I learn a lot that way by just messing up a lot. You know what they say, the best way to learn is the way that you want to. I truly believe in that. Thank you for watching, and I hope all of y'all are safe and well. Bye.
Alright, I'm gonna copy all this actually into a master document. Holy, that's loud. I'm gonna copy all this into a master document.
And I'm making a cozy cafe sim.
I wanna learn from my mistakes today.
Cafes. I started learning game dev only a few months ago, so I'm bad at it. What am I supposed to do now? But I decided that I'm gonna try my hand at releasing a game anyways because I want to get good. And when it comes to learning and improving, nothing motivates me more than the idea of putting something out there for real people to see and enjoy and potentially just completely shit on the internet. This episode is an especially exciting one for me because it documents the process of me hitting my first milestone for my game, which is completing a functional game loop. Basically a very crude but working version of the game that I can actually play through. This time I also cover like double the time span that I usually cover in past episodes, and I learn how to make some of the most complicated game dev things that I've made so far. So I hope you enjoy it. I am building my first traditional inventory system. A good thing is that there are plenty of resources out there that help you learn how to make something like this, because inventory systems are just so common and pretty fundamental when it comes to video games. But I do already have an idea for how I think I can make something like this. So I want to try making this on my own. And if I get stuck or I think I can improve some parts of it, I'll go and look at what's out there. I have chosen my guinea pig, the first object that I will try adding and deleting from my world, which is, drumroll please, coffee machine. I choose you. Furniture is such a long word. As I started to get deeper into working on the edit cafe flow, it slowly dawned on me that I'm probably gonna have to learn how to implement something that I had been avoiding for a while. Okay, wow. So I think I'm gonna have to implement saving and loading. Oh God. All right, back to the drawing board. What is the information that we want to save? The idea of building a save and load system just kind of intimidated me for some reason, but I also knew that I would have to learn it at some point. And at this point, while working on the edit cafe flow, I really wanted to add the functionality for a player to revert changes that they make to their cafe, and for that, I needed to build a save and load system. So it was finally time. Now I'm wondering if I need to like loop through each piece of furniture in a cafe and save all of this information, or if there's a way to just like create a snapshot in a way of the state of the cafe. Lucky for me, or at least that's what I thought in that moment, I did come across this video sharing a simpler way of saving scenes in Godot. The comments did warn that it only really works for super simple scenes, but I was hoping that it would work for my case, and it didn't. So I add the coffee machine, and I have set the position to 0, 0, 0, which makes it so that it's like half buried into the ground, as you can see. But now if I revert changes, so let's say I remove the coffee machine, I'm like, oh no, I want to go back to the save where I had it. I click revert, and that's weird. The coffee machine is back, which is good, but now it's a little bit higher up off the ground, which is not good because it means that I failed to save its position. At this point, I finally accepted that I'm just gonna have to suck it up and learn how to build a save and load system for real. And it turns out that there are several ways to go about doing this. And after watching this very useful video on saving and loading in Godot, I decided to go with a method that uses resources, which is a Godot thing. Disclaimer, later in the video, I do end up switching to a different method that doesn't use this resources because, in short, there are some security concerns involved with using resources for save files. And after doing a bit more research, I decided that I am not really a fan of the proposed workarounds. And will you look at that? Works like a charm. The saving works as well.
Pause this.
Yippee. Success.
Alright. I mapped out skill trees that will be available in chapter 1. 2 abilities.
Today we're continuing to build out the editing the cafe.
Or I should say
part of the
2
game.
special
As of
abilities.
yesterday, we can successfully add things from our inventory into the cafe and also do the reverse.
That are
Take something
passive.
that's in the cafe and store it into our
Basic
inventory.
crafting
And now
system.
today the goal is to make it so
Really just
that we can
alchemy.
actually move furniture around and place it where we want in the cafe. And in order to do that, I want to implement a grid system, for which I've been referencing this YouTube tutorial.
There will be a basic
this
crafting
tutorial
system.
is
I have to
for
write out the scope.
visualizing the grid, which is something I'll need. And then on top of that,
and then
I'll
there will
making some kind
be
of system so I can tell when a square in the grid is taken or not. Y'all, I'm excited to implement this. If I
3
can get
magical
this to work,
abilities.
I'll be
No,
very happy.
we'll do all the abilities for this.
Okay, this is gonna be quite complicated.
We'll do these abilities.
I'll keep this on the side. Okay, first of all, let me make this inventory panel a
They're
little bit
combat.
slimmer
Or no, they're not
so it
combat.
doesn't cover so
We'll do
much of the
magical abilities, that's
cafe
what we'll
while
do.
I'm trying to edit it. You guys ever think about how edited it sounds so weird? Like edited it, edited it, edited it. You know what? That does the job for now. To make my grid system, I started by following that tutorial I mentioned earlier, which also taught me how to make my first little bit of custom tooling. So I can change the dimensions of the grid directly in the editor, which is pretty cool. At first it was showing up double stacked, but once I added in the code that clears the grid before I update it and create a new one, that was a problem no longer. Once I got that working, I spent a very long time adapting the grid code to add in all that functionality that I had scribbled earlier, and kind of losing my mind in the process. Y'all, I could cry right now. It works. I spent so long trying to get it to work. Oh my god. It's the best thing I ever made in my life, in my entire history of existence in this universe and all timelines. Okay, it's probably time to go to sleep. So here's what I got done so far for my editing the cafe flow. Wow. When you're placing the furniture, it highlights the available squares. I know that it also highlights this square where there's something on it, but that's just because I haven't told the game yet that this is furniture and it's taking up this square. I made the furniture shrink when you're holding it just so you can see the square behind it a bit more easily. Otherwise it would be covering the whole square and you can't see it highlight. I'm pretty happy with it. And then look what happens when I put a coffee machine. I have it so that coffee machines can only be put on surfaces, like on counters, so the floors don't light up, only the counter. And then look what happens when I hold the counter now. The coffee machine moves with it. Isn't that cool? And now, look what happens when I place it in the inventory. They both get added into the inventory. It's like magic. It's amazing. It's the legitest thing I've ever made. Obviously everything, like the shapes, the colors, the font, is all placeholder right now, so it's a little bit ugly, but I feel like the mechanic works pretty well. Feels pretty smooth. Yeah. After thinking it through, these are the next few tasks that I decided to work on. In terms of things related to moving and placing furniture, I want to add in support for some basic things like rotating the furniture to face the way that you want it to, supporting furniture that spans multiple squares, such as my chair and table sets. Those are a 2x1 kind of block, so providing support for that. Also right now I reset the furniture in the cafe between days. I do like it resetting between sessions, so like if you close out of the game and reopen it, the cafe is reset. It's just convenient right now for testing purposes, but I do want to save the furniture between days. And before getting to that stuff, I want to take a moment to add in the flow for setting the cafe's menu for the day. I kind of wanted a break from thinking so specifically about the furniture, which is why I'll be working on the menu stuff first. As for the setting the cafe menu functionality, it was pretty straightforward because I'd basically learned everything I needed for adding, removing.
She's wicked wholesome. I love her.
Inventory system
It's making me stay excited.
my furniture inventory. Except with this, there's just a little bit more UI and buttons to handle. All right, here's what I've got. You can see what I have on the menu up here on the top left. Click edit menu. Here you'll see all the recipes that you've unlocked. Right now I just have one recipe. You can toggle this button to put it on the menu or remove it. So I just removed it. And if I click save, you can see that the menu updated. So it's empty. Of course, it's a problem if the menu is empty, so when I'm finishing up this flow, I would throw some kind of error telling
I'll probably redo
players
this
to
prototype.
add something to the menu in order to proceed. But for now, I just wanted to get this working. It's gonna feel so good once I get to doing a UI sweep because this is really ugly. So now the player can edit the cafe's menu, which is great, but it actually doesn't do anything yet because I've hard-coded the menu for the day. So the next thing for me to do is actually load the menu that the player set when they start the day. I put something together already. I have this load save function that I wrote, and now I need to test that this works. But in order for me to test it, I think I'm gonna have to add another menu item. Because as you may know, I only have one recipe in the game right now, which is the Americano. It's a little hard to test if the menu changed when I really don't have any other menu options. So it's time to unveil a new recipe, which will be, what should it be? The latte. While the Americano in my game as of right now is a cold drink that is served in a glass, I wanted the latte to be a hot drink. Therefore, I needed to add a separate mug dispenser of sorts. I thought I was being super clever by making this templates resource where I was storing a bunch of preloaded scenes, which I could then easily pull from other parts of the code. But later on, this templates file ended up being the bane of my existence. I also, of course, had to make the mug itself that is dispensed from the mug dispenser. And once I felt like I got something roughly set up, it was time to test it out. Why can't I grab a mug from it? Let's put a print statement here. Okay, let's see what prints. Nothing. Nothing at all. Oh, let's try this again. Okay, something else broke. Oh, I see. Attempt number 3. Okay, something new broke. Attempt number 4. It let me save, but it also got rid of my coffee machine. Oh. Oh, what's going on? It's the latte of darkness for some reason. All right, we took quite a few detours to fix things that broke along the way, but the whole point was to check that editing the menu works. So let's remove latte, and if I save like so and start the day, hopefully the customers will know that the menu has updated and only order Americanos, which seems to work. And then let's go
Oh, it's already
back
there.
and try with lattes this time. Save, start the day. Now they should only order lattes, except I forgot to add a coffee machine, so I can't serve them, but yeah, I can check that they ask for lattes. Cool. And finally, you know,
Oh, that's why
let's
it's
just add
saved.
all the coffee machines. If I keep both of them on the menu, like so, people should order both. I just have the orders completely randomized, so let's wait for them to order again. Oh, let me find their crayon for them real quick. Here you go. Now order some coffee, please. Why are they all ordering Americanos? Let me just try again. I don't understand why it wouldn't work. Thank
No,
you.
Juan.
I was losing my mind. Okay, it works. I'm gonna switch back to working on editing the cafe. So moving your furniture around and all that. Because I have a couple very important basic functionality that you need for editing the cafe that I haven't built yet. I'm really putting in effort to like plan out what I'm gonna code before I do it, because it really does help a lot for me. And even though I am quite a scribbler, I like using my notebooks a lot, I do find myself rushing a lot of the time, and I just want to like skip the steps, but it always ends up with me having a bigger headache once I get to coding. I thought of like 2 different ways that I could possibly go about this. I think the second way is probably more straightforward, so I'll be going with that. I was gonna define a new enum for rotations, but I forgot that I already made one. I forgot about it, but I actually use it for this mechanic, for rotating my scene. Okay, so it should work now, right? Yes, it does. It's kind of hard to tell because the front and back look the same.
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
I've been better.
Make like a furniture and equipment class so that I stop copy pasting code and then having to update it everywhere. Let's see that everything works properly when I save the game. If I save it like this, go back, rotate it again.
Yeah, I lost something important and well, 3 important things. I'm a little pissed, but we're doing better. And I roughly know where it is. I just don't know if the hotel I called was the right one or not. If not, I'll just ask my friend which one we stayed at. But I'll ask him tonight. And then I'll call whoever it was tonight.
I'm intimidated. This task is
I'll be like, hey, I mean, if they got tossed, it's no big. It's not that big a deal. It's just frustrating. But I don't think they tossed them. I think they'd at least hold them a month. I went there only 2 weeks ago. Hi, Andromeda.
I'm running out of space here in this notebook.
Alright, core concept.
Basically, first off, I want to give my furniture items a property that tells us what dimensions the furniture is in terms of like number of squares on the grid that it takes up. And then number 2, based on the dimensions, I want to generate some kind of like matrix, basically a way to know which other cells in the grid to activate when you're hovering over one cell. For example, if the furniture is 3 by 3, then when I hover over this square in the grid, I want to highlight all these other cells all around it. But if it's a 2 by 2 furniture, then
Hi, Andromeda, I see you.
I'll highlight the cells in this kind of formation instead, and hopefully I'll be able to activate the cells in the grid based on the matrix. For now, I'm going to focus on step 1 and 2. I have a bit of a conundrum. I opened up my Godot project today and I get this. The dreaded corrupted message. Well, first off, I'm gonna have to open this file in a different editor because Godot will not open it for me because it's corrupt. So I fixed the issue and everything runs.
Andromeda, you're gonna give yourself a paper cut on your eyes. Get down. Down. Andromeda. Get down. Give me anxiety.
Figured it out.
You're supposed to fix my anxiety.
That I had not, in fact, figured it out. That was quite the detour. Didn't expect that to happen. But now I can finally pick up where I left off yesterday with implementing moving around big pieces of furniture. So I'm using my counter over here as my guinea pig. Basically, my idea is that, let's say I'm holding a piece of furniture. I'm holding this counter, and while I'm holding this, I'm hovering over a cell in the grid, so one of these blue squares. And these 2 arrays, they tell me which cells to the left and right, and to the top and bottom of the cell that I'm hovering over, that this piece of furniture is going to occupy. So first thing I need to do is my cells in the grid, they need to be able to tell me where they are on the grid. I think it'll be as simple as this. I'm already looping through X and Y to create the grid in the first place, so I'll just pass those 2 values into my grid cell. I broke my game like a million times to try and make this work, but alas, it works! And then if you go too close to the edge of the grid, it turns red. Wow. It was painful to get this to work. Oh my god. I can also change the dimensions. For example, now it's a 2 by 1, and there you go. Amazing. There's still a lot for me to get done to round out the edges, but my brain feels pretty fried and I don't want to burn myself out. I left myself a little note at the bottom of my task page because I have a bad memory, so I'm not going to remember where I left off otherwise. Yesterday, I took a little break from game dev. I made myself some red velvet cookies for the first time instead, which were surprisingly delicious. And I also watched Mean Girls again I was just feeling very girly pop. So now that I'm all rested up, it's time to get back into finishing up this current task. At least that's what I had planned to get done that day, but my game decided to break on me another several times. And so I ended up just spending all day trying to figure out why. What is all this? And for those of you that were worried for me last video and were like, I hope Ruby learned how to use version control. I did. I've been git committing all my changes, so I hope you're proud of me. But for this instance, I didn't use my version control powers to revert back because I wanted to figure out the root of the issue. And this time, thankfully, I actually did. So I believe that this is the problem. So when we're loading up the furniture templates class, we try to load test scene. And in order to load the test scene, we need to load the grid. And in order to load the grid, we need to reference furniture templates. So I think that's where this cycle was. I keep running into this issue everywhere with the preloads. I don't realize that there's a cyclical dependency like this. So I'm considering rewriting a lot of my code that uses these like template classes and try to reference the pack scenes in a different way. I'll just do file paths dot furniture. Why doesn't it recognize file paths? Oh, I forgot to save. Silly me. I'm going to load this. That fixes it. Alright, it's kind of late now, so I'm not going to be able to make much more progress today, but let me just try to return the game to a usable state. So the weird thing is, moving it quickly highlights the cells, but moving slowly, it doesn't work. What the hell? Alright, everything is working as expected now. 'Twas a journey. Today ended up being a very scuffed day. I couldn't really get to as much as I wanted to because I was busy breaking and fixing my game. Moral of the story, I'm never preloading a file again. That, or rather, I'll be very careful next time I consider preloading a file because I keep breaking my game that way. I feel like I'm finally getting to a point with my game where when something doesn't work, it's a little harder now to figure out why, because the problem can be a little bit more nested now, which is fun. At least I was able to address the note that I left for myself, so I got something done. But honestly, I'm feeling a little bit frustrated with how slowly implementing this feature is going. But that's just how it is, man. I'm just a noob, so I should be a little more patient with myself. I want to pause for a moment and change how I'm doing my saving and loading save data for my game. I had watched this great video that gives an overview for a few popular options for saving your game data in Godot, and I had chosen to go with resources for now because it seemed pretty intuitive, at least for me, someone who has no experience creating like save files. And it has been pretty convenient to use. However, there is a security concern because the thing is, you can inject code into resources, which means that, let's say a player downloads a save from the internet, somebody could have injected some malicious code into that save file, and now they're f***ed. I don't really know how much people would be like sharing and downloading saves of my game from the internet, but like I still don't feel good about that being a possibility. There were two main options to consider as an alternative for my save format, JSONs and dictionaries, and I decided to go with the latter because although JSONs are readable, and that's nice, dictionaries seem to be a bit more code friendly in that a lot of the data types like vectors,
you're trying to get to everyone's focus on shoulders,
and it seems efficient in terms of like file size and stuff. Converting the save file types was honestly super straightforward. Basically all I did was convert all of these exported variables into keys in the dictionary, so it was pretty straightforward. And now we can move on to working on the shop, which is exciting. Alright, so I have a vision. I want the shop to like exist physically. Okay, so I only have the floor right now, but my idea is that I show the furniture that's on display that day in the shop. It comes up here you can see it in 3D. It's not just like a 2D menu. The reason why I want to make it 3D is because, one, I just think it'll be delightful. The idea just sparks joy in me. But two, there is like a practical reason, which is that I think it'll be useful for the player to like physically see what a piece of furniture looks like the dimensions and everything, so that they can make a more informed purchase. It'll take a bit more work than just doing all this in 2D with just UI and pictures, but I don't know, I want to do it. I set up my store scene, I wrote some code to add the furniture into the scene, and I also have this store manager that helps to get the store all set up and running when I switch the scene over to the store, and all this other code that's for this pop-up that is for purchasing an item when you click on it. I have these like manager nodes, and then like UI nodes, and then these 3D nodes which actually contain all the furniture and stuff in the world, but I think I'll eventually take a sweep and change how I'm organizing all the code here. It's just starting to be a little bit clunky. But anyways, I haven't tested the stuff that I built for the store yet, so let's do that together. This first test did not go well. I broke the game. I had a suspicion that the problem had to do with the new way that I was saving data. So I took a look at the new save file, and even though most of it is not very readable for humans, I could work out enough to confirm that there seemed to be something weird going on. Okay, back to the docs we go. Once I resolved what was
Hold on, I'm pausing this.
files, are you happy?
Let me just
now,
finish this
Godot?
real quick.
I was able to finish up adding the store into my game. The next task that I have queued up for myself is building out the recipe shop. Now, unlike with the furniture shop, I don't really have like a super clear vision of what I want the recipe shop to look like. So I'm just gonna put something together for now, just really a placeholder, and I'll flesh out the vision as I go. This is what
I'll
I
take a
came
break.
up with for
Take a break.
the recipe shop for now. Very simple. Imagine
I'm taking a
there's
break.
a
I am
counter of some sort
looking
here
at stuff.
and a NPC that is the shopkeeper.
I'm allowed on
and then
Pinterest.
just have some kind of UI that shows the recipes that you can unlock. Since I now had experience building shop mechanics for the furniture store, I was able to build the recipe shop pretty quickly. And with that part of the puzzle added in, my game now had a place for every major part of the game flow. A place for you to design your cafe, a place for you to run it and serve customers and earn money, and then a place for you to spend that money on new furniture and recipes for your cafe and for your customers. Obviously, this is just the beginning for my game, and every part of it right now is just a vague semblance of what the idea for it is, but it still feels really good because it feels like I've reached my first checkpoint. Looking back, I'm so glad that I didn't tunnel vision into completely fleshing out the day part of my game and instead focused on getting each part of the game at least functioning, because one of my worries as a beginner was that I'll build out completely one part of the game only to find out that the gears don't fit into all the rest of the game. But now I have all the major gears in place and they are running. Also, a huge thank you to all the game devs that have been sharing your advice in the comments below. I really feel that y'all help nudge me in the right direction, so thank you. And thank you to everyone for watching. Thank you so much for lending me a piece of your time. Hope you guys take care. Until next time. Bye. And have no idea why I wrote it the way I did. I love that.
Alright, this is new. I haven't seen.
Hey guys, it's Rui. Today was my first day back to coding after a few weeks. Last video, I reached my first checkpoint, which was to finish making a functional game loop with all the main parts of the game blocked out. Once I got that done, I took a break from my game, during which I spent a lot of time outside enjoying the early spring weather, making my last video, and also starting a new side quest, which you'll see more of later in this episode. Now that I've finished phase 1, something new that I'm trying for my next phase is I'm gonna try having no deadlines, no time estimates, no order of operations. Before, with my first phase, I tried to write out a rough timeline and estimate how long things would take, but it ended up just not being very useful for me because It's just
Like-
hard to come up with concrete plans when
Oh.
you don't really know what you're doing. So my plans would keep changing and the timelines would keep shifting, and then I would feel stressed about it. So I thought that maybe it would be better to be more flexible.
I'll take
for now.
notes on
And
something
once I
else.
Get a better understanding.
That's not
of how it
exactly
works,
related to
how
the game,
long things
so it
take me,
counts as taking
then
a
I can
break.
start being a bit more deliberate. But for now, I'm just gonna try moving intuitively.
Even though
I
my
guess.
fingers are starting to
Although
hurt.
I did come up with a general theme that I want for this phase to be about, and then I wrote a list of tasks based on that theme. So
Okay.
there is some
That's
planning that I
perfect.
did there. But in terms of how I'm approaching getting all this done, I'm just gonna take it one at a time in no particular order. So to start, I decided to work on this checklist item because it just spoke to me. And once I'm done with it, I'll just choose another one from the list that I feel like working on and do that one until I finish all of them. At least that's the plan. We'll see how it goes. The first task I chose off the to-do list was furniturizing all the furniture. Now, what does that even mean? One of my priorities this phase is to get customizing the cafe to start feeling at least somewhat legit. I want for creative agency to be a core value in my game, and a pretty basic place to start with that would probably be to give my players the ability to place their cafe furniture wherever they want. At this point in development though, I had only made a couple of the items movable while the rest were just built into the cafe because I was just quickly trying to build out the basic functionality. But it was now time to change that and get all the furniture moving. Except there was one problem. I have some unfortunate news to share. I think I'm gonna have to redo my entire grid system. So here's the problem. As I mentioned, I'm currently working on furniturizing all the starter furniture, and I just got finished with the tables and chairs. They work fine, work great. And so I was gonna move on to the next piece of furniture, which I decided will be the door. And here's where the problem started. Because the door, it's a special piece of furniture. It's not like other furniture. Because, unlike all the other starter furniture, it takes up both wall tiles and floor tiles. The wall tiles because obviously the door is built into the wall, and it also takes up a floor tile because that's where the customer spawns. They spawn on the tile in front of the door. And the way I have the grid set up right now, it's gonna be very complicated to be able to take up both wall tiles and floor tiles. So I'm thinking of just completely changing the system, possibly not even using these tiles at all. These tiles that I spent so long on and wrote many lines of code for, all down the drain. The good news is that I do have an idea of how I want to build my new placing the furniture system. I watched a YouTube tutorial that is pretty relevant for what I want to do, so I think I'm going to do something very similar. This time I'm going to try my best to make my system more versatile so it works fine with all types of furniture, whether you place it on a wall or a floor or a ceiling or whatever. Honestly, even though it didn't work out, I'm glad that I started somewhere with the grid system anyways, because honestly I was just kind of scared to build something like this in the first place. It's one of the more complicated things that I've had to build so far, which is why I just started by only thinking about the floor grid and not considering the walls or anything else, because just that part was a lot for me to think about in that moment. But now that I feel a bit more familiar with the territory of moving and placing items, I feel like I've been primed and ready to make a better system. Currently on like day 3 of working on my new grid / placing furniture system, and guys, it's going well. I think it's just so much better. And it was kind of way easier to code, which is great. It's a good thing, but it also makes me mad because you're telling me I wrote all that complicated shit for the old system for nothing. So this new system, it does use more parts. Like now all my surfaces have this boundary around them, and each of my furniture items now require an additional collision shape. But the code is much simpler, much more readable, especially for like a week in the future when I go back to it and have no idea why I wrote it the way I did. There's still a long ways to go with converting all of the grid system over, so I'm just gonna keep going. I spent the next couple of days remaking all the furniture I'd added into the game until then, which thankfully was not very much, and I also rewrote and cleaned up all the relevant code for them so that they can be placed and moved around and rotated as expected. It took me a long time to overhaul and convert everything. I think especially because I was coming back from a pretty long break from coding, so that part of my brain had to like be started back up again. But it was so worth it because just look at how much more freely you can move things around now compared to when everything was confined to the grid. I just feel like it's so much better from the player's perspective and my perspective because this system is easier for me to expand and work with going forward. And now that the overhaul was complete, I could move on to the next task that I wanted to work on, which would be adding a new and exciting piece of furniture to the collection. The last piece of starter furniture that I want to add is a window, which I have no idea how to make. Basically, I want to be able to punch a hole through the wall wherever I place the window so that you can look out the window into the void. After doing a bit of internet sleuthing, I learned about a fairly new feature in Godot that I thought might let me get the see-through effect that I wanted for my windows, which is this stencil property. There were several settings under it, so at first I just clicked around to see what they all do, and then I went back to my task at hand. I was able to get the transparency effect going pretty quickly, but there were some rough edges that would need polishing. Oh my god, it's perfect. Except that you can see through the window through the top. Oh, and other than the fact that you can see through the other wall. I don't know what I'm doing. After trying several things that didn't work, reading many docs, watching a couple relevant videos, and letting the cat into the room. What would you like to tell the class today? Okay, thank you very much. I finally came up with a solution, which without getting too into it, basically involves this reference number property. You see it, and then you don't. Oh, this is awesome. Oh, I decided not to make it see-through from this side. I'll put like a window texture instead. And I didn't have to write any shader code for this, which, I mean, to be honest, I was kind of looking forward to it. I do want to get better at shaders, but I'm sure I'll have plenty of opportunities to get to playing with shaders later down the line. And then it was time to actually make a window that I can place and move around in the cafe.
I think it's working. It's hard to tell because all the meshes and the depths are weird. Why does it do that?
What I learned through all this is that the way transparency works in video games is way more complicated than I thought. But thankfully, I was able to get things looking mostly normal in the end, as long as you don't look at things from this angle.
Oh my god, that feels good.
Guys, I ordered a shirt online and it arrived today, but it's not any kind of shirt. No, it's a shirt that I designed myself. I really like graphic tees, and I have designed and ordered custom merch for like school club activities and company stuff and such, but it's my first time making something just for myself. Let's see how it turned out. What if it sucks? What if it's just absolute shit? It's okay. It didn't really pick up on the more intricate edges and the brush strokes that I used. The print itself is not super crisp. Wait, but my favorite part, this came out so good. I put a label on the inside. How cute is that? It looks so good. I love that. I am quite interested in opening an online store in the future where I can sell t-shirts and stuff like that with my own designs on them. Honestly, mostly because I want to make these kind of things for myself. And so might as well also put it out there for other people to possibly enjoy as well. But unfortunately, I'm not fully satisfied with the quality of this particular shirt. But I do already have some ideas for how I can make my graphics a bit more optimized for t-shirts in terms of like the sizing and the graphic style and stuff. And I also now have a reference for what kind of thickness and shape t-shirt that I prefer. This one's not as thick and oversized as I like my shirts to be. I'll continue this t-shirt storyline next time that I have an idea for a graphic. Today I'm going to start work on building out a pretty significant change to my game. An important reflection that I had from just observing my game at this current, albeit scrappy state, is that I feel like it's not mentally stimulating enough a game. For my taste. And the part of the game that I felt this the most is with the quirks. Originally, my idea was that one of the main parts of the game would be that the customers that come to your cafe, they are quirky. They're silly little beans, and basically I have to help them out by picking up their crayon for them or plugging in the laptop charger for them. And I thought it would be very cute and delightful, which it is the first like 3 times that you pick up somebody's crayon for them. But then once you get to like the 10th time and the 20th time and the 30th time, it starts feeling kind of more like busy work, you know? And I couldn't help but feeling that way about most of the features that happen during the day of the cafe where you're serving the customers and stuff. So I thought, what if I add another variable to the game? Something that makes it so you have to use your brain cells a little bit more. Not a whole lot. I'm not trying to make some kind of complicated strategy game here, but just something more mentally stimulating. So my idea right now is that customers will have several different mood bars for various positive moods. And by filling up a mood bar, you earn something, I'm calling them sparks for now, that are associated with that particular mood. And basically these sparks, or whatever I end up calling them, will be another category of currency on top of the coins that I currently have. And I'm still keeping it open as to what exactly this currency is used for, but for now I'm thinking that you use them to unlock new recipes. And now the way that this adds complexity to the game is that different choices that you make can have different effects on the customer's mood. The furniture that you place, the foods that you serve and recommend, whether you fulfill a customer's seating preferences or not, and potentially many other things can have various different effects on how creative or joyful or focused a customer feels. So I'm pretty excited about this. I feel like this moods thing will act as a glue to help tie a lot of different parts of the game together that felt a little bit like loose ends before. And I have more plans and ideas surrounding moods that I want to share with you guys as I go. But for now, let's start by adding the moods feature into the game.
Finish this.
All right, the machinery has all been set up now for giving my customers emotions. So now you can see. Oh, it went away pretty quickly because I had to open a new dialogue, but there it was. The pop-up is not very crisp. It's kind of pixelated, not sure why. You can see that when I recommend an order and it fits their preferences, like this customer wants something cool and the Americano, it's an iced Americano. I probably should clarify that. It affects the mood. You can click on them when they're chilling to check their mood. I came up with these 3 for now, but I'd be curious to see if you guys have ideas for any other relevant moods for people working at a cafe. I'm trying to stick to positive ones. This is a cozy game after all. So for this customer, their creativity is maxed out, which means that when they leave, I'll earn a creativity spark, and this counter will go up by 1. Today concludes 2 weeks of running my little experiment to see what it's like to work on my game without any timeline, any time constraints, or schedules, with just a checklist as my guide to eventually tick off. So here is my final verdict and my reflection. First of all, I very much enjoyed not having deadlines or a timeline or roadmap kind of thing. I feel like time budgeting is something that I will do for maybe my next game, but isn't appropriate for my first run at making a real game. Of course, I do have that anxious voice in my brain sometimes that makes me think about what if I'm not moving fast enough. But what I've realized is that even though I want to do a good job, at the end of the day, I chose to start learning game dev because I enjoy it. And that is a very precious thing for me. I really don't want to lose this feeling again because I have before when I burnt out and it was not a fun time. So I think for me, the healthier way for me to deal with those anxieties is basically to not treat my game so desperately. I think for now it's enough for me to focus on trying to make a game that I like and keep on enjoying making games. That being said, although I like,
I got my dad's gonna send me money. Chat.
I think that
Lock in.
kind of willy-nilly,
My dad's gonna get me lunch.
however long I want, was not super good for me. How I'm gonna adjust my process going forward is I think that it would be good for me to work on game dev stuff at around the same time every day, because at the end of the day, I am a creature of habit, I suppose. Whenever I would work on my game, I would work on it for longer than I would like to, and I'd feel pretty exhausted at the end of it. And just logistically speaking, I have other things that I'm up to outside of making my game, you know? And so in order to make it so that my game dev stuff fits in more seamlessly with all the other things I do in the day-to-day.
Sounds like I'm hungry. I'm eating sherbet. Oh, let me... I'll take the follow. Sorry, I've not been locked in. Or I have been locked in. I've been too locked in. Let me pause this. I'll be right back.
My brain gets in the mood at the same time every day. And with that, thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Hey guys, my name is Thomas Brush, owner of Atmos Games. By the end of this video, you're going to have a full understanding of how exactly video games are made. I'll even throw in a secret at the end of this video that took me, well, 10 years to figure out and has made my career as a game developer so much easier. Now obviously there's a ton of different engines to create games with. You've got Unity, Unreal, Godot, the list goes on, but believe it or not, video games are made pretty much the same way no matter what engine you're using. Now, to create a game, you take assets, and that's basically just PNGs or JPEG images or maybe 3D models, MP3 files, WAV files, really any kind of digital file you can think of, and then you attach a script to that asset. Now, these scripts are basically, I don't know, magical spells that tell the assets how to behave in the world, or what we're going to call the scene. So for example, I can tell a PNG image to move left or right if the player presses left or right on the keyboard. This is a script interacting with a asset. Now, any seasoned game developer is going to have a minimum of, let's say, 3 applications running while they're making their game at all times, because they're going to be going back and forth between asset creation, game creation, and coding. So making games requires you to have a ton of software open all the time because, well, you're creating and tweaking all kinds of assets and then incorporating them into a single piece of software. And again, that's going to be your engine. That's Unity, Unreal, Godot, Game Maker.
Is it called Godot? I've been calling it Godot. None of you told me.
But in my opinion, Unity is the easiest to learn and is a decent tool in creating indie games and also AA games. So if you're looking at making a AAA game, I don't know, your dream open world game, then Unreal might be a better bet. But for now, Unity is pretty awesome. Okay, so how do you create these assets for your game? Okay, so here's the thing about making games. Creating assets is like 50% of the work. Manipulating them to do stuff in the game is the other 50%. So for example, if you're making, let's say, a 2D game and you understand Photoshop, you're probably going to spend a lot of time making your game in Photoshop. Unity is only used when you're ready to make that 2D art actually do something. Now the same is true for all other assets. For example, sounds are edited in Audacity or maybe FL Studio, or 3D models in Blender, textures in Photoshop, scripts in Visual Studio. I mean, this is ultimately where most noobs get hung up. They struggle because the amount of tools they're going to learn is, frankly, kind of terrifying.
I spent, hold on.
If you
chat, I don't care what he's about to say. Chat, when I tell you, there's someone who follows me out, who I met, and they can testify to this. I spent maybe an hour, easily 2 hours, researching narrative design tools alone last night. That's what started all this. I was like, I was gonna get this because it's on Steam. But it's $30. And they were like, you're gonna spend $30 on a game on your first game. And I was like, honestly, you're so real for that. So I went looking. I took notes and everything. And that's what started this. Now we're here. And I found 2 tools that are free. But yeah. Okay. Oh my god. Oh, and Ask gonna run. I want to run right now.
Know how to create
yeah.
just some assets. You're way closer to making games than you think. Okay, so we create these digital files and then save them into an assets folder. We can then drag them into a new scene, and that's, again, just basically a blank level in our game engine. Once you've placed a few assets, you can begin controlling these assets with these magical scripts. Got it so far? Now, here's a big problem. What if we want to create a 2D character for our game? Well, we would place the sprite in our game, but we would also maybe want to play some MP3 files with that sprite. But we also want it to collide with the floor and the walls using physics code, and maybe also show a font above the sprite. How exactly do we create a single character with all these different digital files? Well, these various
I'm going immediately to DoorDash.
Assets, they end up being called components in Unity. And they can be slapped onto an empty container called a game object. Or in Unreal's case, it's called an actor. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to say game object. Okay, so let's say you drag a PNG into a scene in Unity. It's not a PNG object. Unity will automatically create an empty container for you. Again, this is called a game object. And this newly created game object will then contain a sprite renderer component on that game object. And that sprite renderer component not only has a slot containing what the actual sprite should be, but also its X and Y flip values, its coloring, and other parameters. Essentially, a game object is a Frankenstein of an infinite amount of component combinations that all have tweakable variables, and we'll talk about variables in a minute. So here are a few examples of game objects. A player game object. This is a player with a single game object that contains a capsule collider component, and that's just an invisible force field component that interacts with the world and prevents the player from passing through the
food's been ordered.
walls.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so the player game object may also
contain
something, let's say, like a rigid body, which kind of sounds like a collider, but maybe think of it this way. A rigid body makes something interact with gravity. A collider makes it solid. So a UFO, for example, without a rigid body will simply float in place. The player can also contain audio sources that will play sounds. That's a component. It can also contain a text component, a camera component, or even any custom components that you've written. And these are just basically scripts. And you can also include some from your team, or maybe some from online forums. That's totally fine. Frankly, these are my favorite. Now keep in mind, you can parent game objects to other game objects. I mean, this essentially means that the parent object's scale, rotation, and position will impact its children. I mean, ultimately, you can have as many children in a game object as you want. And even the children can have children. You can have a massive family tree inside each parent game object. This makes it so much easier to deactivate entire parts of levels or groups of enemies or move a bunch of objects around in the editor. Okay, so now that we understand game objects, how exactly is the player going to see them? Well, we need to tell Unity what to look at. For example, should it follow the player smoothly from side to side, like a 2D game? Or is it first person, or should it follow from an isometric perspective? Or maybe the camera's still, like in Resident Evil. This is all handled by something called, you guessed it, a camera. And you can stack as many cameras in Unity or Unreal as you want and just switch them on and off. These cameras are still game objects. They are just game objects with a camera component on them. And maybe a script that tells the camera component what to do or what to look at. Or you could just use the built-in Cinemachine tool to quickly get the camera to follow the player, no matter what style of game you have. The Cinemachine tool is actually pretty sweet. Okay, so what about making these game objects, these prefabs, actually do something, anything? Well, you do this with those magical scripts. Well, think about your game objects like they're your teenage kids. They need to be guided, they need to be told what to do, how to behave, and what things are okay, what aren't okay, and I guess ultimately what the rules are. Now, sadly, you have to be really clear with how you communicate to your teenage kids because, well, they're super rebellious and they tend to find just about every possible way to break your rules. So your teenage kids in Unity speak C# and C++ in Unreal. Now, in both cases, both platforms have something
Selena!
scripting.
Hello! How was your stream? Hello everybody, welcome. I'm Lumin. I stream. Oh, welcome. I don't think I have the proper set up. I love your work. I love Spirit. I love I say thank you. I love it so much. I appreciate the. Oh, I hope Slay the Spire 2 is good. I've never played it, but a fun fact: we are learning the engine that it's built on. Ignore this. This is the wrong video, but we are learning the engine that Slay the Spire 2 is made on. So, welcome everyone. I also realized I did not set my timer or start my timer. But welcome. Slay the Spire 2 is sick. Alright, there's my cats. But I'm sorry, I'm like so gone. Do that good post-stream self-care. I appreciate the raid. I'll take good care of everyone. I'm so tame today. I'm so tame because I'm locked in today. I'm treating my chat so well. Don't let them tell you otherwise. They're being treated so well and kindly. I would never bully my chat. I would never force them to watch my indulge in my hyperfixations with me. I would never do such a thing.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joe.
But yes, for everyone joining, welcome. I don't bully you. Welcome. I'm Lumin. I usually stream a variety of things at this point. One of my hyperfixations right now is learning game development. So I'm planning and doing some sketches today is the plan. I work overnights, so I've been up since 5 p.m. yesterday and it's currently 10 a.m. for me. But I'm very wired, so that's why I'm up for so long. But yeah, right now I'm planning out the scope for what my game will be because it's going to be a small segment of what I originally planned. It's going to be my first ever game I'm developing. So we're just chilling out, watching some videos in my game dev queue playlist, my game dev learning queue playlist, and really just chilling out. And then once I finish this, we'll do some Godot tutorial. That's the game engine I'll be using. As I mentioned, Slay the Spire 2 was built in it. A nice alternative to Unity, and it's free. Forever free. And then after that, or before that, we'll do some sketching, some concept sketching, which I'm not good at art, but I'm learning. So, if that sounds interesting, we are glad to have you. But of course, if you need to leave or just want to leave, no one will blame you, and we appreciate you coming by. I used to have a whole sticky note telling me what to say when I get raids, and I lost it. Which is funny because I'm so organized in every other aspect of my life. Well, no, but it was good. Was it good? I did my best. I did my best. And thank you for the follows. I appreciate it. Very pro. I'm a professional.
That might seem like a bit of a lofty, made-up term for something that should just happen organically.
Oh yeah, this is called the secret to good game ideas. So I'll go over what I have so far for the. Oh, my DoorDash is waiting for my order. So I'm going through the scope. I'm making the scope because it's in one of those notebooks I lost, is what my old scope was. But I think it was. I was dragging my feet on doing all this work because I was like, oh, I have all these notes. I was so attached to those notes. So now that I'm not able to use those notes, I have to force myself to do this. So I have the core concept of the game. It's gonna be a 3D game where you're a lone traveler. You go to a desolate spirit world in an effort to save your dying friend. There'll be a prologue. That's what I just put. There's gonna be a prologue. And then there's gonna be the first biome, which is like a forest biome. There will be one main quest line that'll carry you from, well, through the whole thing really. But there's one super main quest line. I haven't decided how many quests will be in it yet. I'll decide that when I actually learn how to make a quest system. That's one of the tutorials I have queued up, not for today. Well, maybe for today, I don't know yet. But I have a tutorial on that, and I'm sure there's plenty of YouTube videos for it. And then I think I just decided on 7 to 9 side quests because I was thinking it'll flesh out the world a bit. I want to include a lot of world building if I can, is my goal for this. Yeah, there will be a prologue that's like a flashback, and then you'll wake up in the biome, and then you have the little arc. There'll be a couple cutscenes. There will be 8 to 9. Wait, I counted that wrong. There will be 7 to 8 NPCs. One of them is a nice to have. I've started marking things as this would be ideal to have, but it's going to require a lot more energy to do. So it depends if I'm able to do it or not. Because I have to design all these characters. I will be making everything except for the music and sound effects by scratch, essentially. I'm going to learn how to do it all. Because why not? I need something to do during my overnight shift. And yeah. Like the scope, there's going to be 7 to 8 NPCs. Let me go. And nice to have as well is 5 to 7 requests. There might be a mailing system. That's also a nice to have. So that, since that's like a whole system, a whole character, and then a whole quest, whole thingy, that's all nice to have. And now I'm doing the settings scope, which is thankfully in my notes. I put all my settings in here. So thank gosh. But I'll let this play so you guys can sort of. This isn't what I do for ideation, I don't think. Because obviously if I haven't watched the video yet, but it'll be useful. I know some people said they were interested in game development, so
because if you're a
that'd be
creative
helpful.
person, you probably have
Would
more
be
ideas than
helpful.
you know what to do with. The problem is systematically reviewing those ideas and also coming up with ideas that you can actually execute. So I'm going to give you 8 techniques for generating and assessing ideas, and some of these will be focused on trying to come up with new and original ideas, and some of these will be more about how do you judge what is a good idea and what isn't. I've just said the word idea so many times it's lost all meaning. The first thing on my list is going to be inspiration from life. Now, when you're thinking about a setting for your game and who the player character is, it might not seem obvious to think about menial jobs you've done, but there have been plenty of games about these sorts of things. If you've ever delivered newspapers or looked after a child or worked in a warehouse, those are all things that have had successful games made about them. It might not seem very exciting or inspiring to you to
Hold on,
start
did I
off with
cook?
mundane, everyday slice of life type topics for your
I might have
game
cooked, chat.
ideas. But do you know what else is not particularly exciting? Looking at the hundreds and hundreds of mediocre indie games about zombies.
I'll explain
fantasy,
way
and
later.
spaceships.
Oh, my
I love those
timer.
things as much as anyone else, but the market is absolutely full of them. The other benefit of starting with your own experience as ideas for games is it often means you have to actually do some game design. If you are making a game that is mainly about combat and crafting, those have mechanics and systems that have been done thousands and thousands of times before, and you can just sort of pick and choose what you like from other games. If you are making a game about babysitting, it's a bit harder. You have to actually do some design from scratch, so it could be quite a good exercise to pick one of these sorts of things to try and design a game around. And you end up in a position where instead of being one of 1,000 people who's made a game about goblins, you're 1 in 100 people who's made a game about bakeries. Or whatever. It could be something to do with where you're from and the national or local culture of where you're from that inspires your game, that makes it stand out in a way that being the 10 millionth person making a game about zombies simply
Okay,
won't.
there'll be 4 to
Now,
7
the
locations
second
of
thing on
interest
my
that aren't the
list might
main
sound
place, which
quite
is where the
similar to
boss will be.
first, but bear with me a moment. Number 2 is
And then you
looking
do
at
have a home
non-game
base as well.
for ideas for how to design interactions in your game. It's probably best here for me to start off with some examples. Reigns is a kingdom management simulator where you make decisions about a kingdom that you're managing. But you do it all through swiping left and right, and the game is basically designed entirely around mimicking the interface of the dating app Tinder. That's what I mean about looking at something that's not a game and working out how you can use that interaction to design a game. Whether or not Tinder is a game is probably
Hi,
a
Nelly.
question for another day. Mini Metro was designed around the idea of it being like a toy train set. Another example of what I'm talking about would be that big old slingshot in Angry Birds. Now, even the most casual player of video games can look at that big slingshot and just immediately understand the type of interaction that is going to happen on their screen, because the slingshot is an object from the real world that physically behaves in a certain way. And the same sort of cross-pollination can of course happen with non-digital games inspiring digital games. Like Among Us is very similar to the social deduction game Werewolf or Mafia, but with some extra steps added in to make it more video gamey. While you can look at things in the real world for thematic inspiration, i.e. what the setting is, who the hero is, you can also look at things in the real world for examples of ways that are fun to play. As a game designer, you should be interested and curious about the design of everyday things, looking at things in the world and thinking about what is fun to play with, even if it's just something like a fidget cube. Toys and different kinds of apps and software that aren't necessarily games can give you all sorts of ideas for interesting interactions which might make your game stand out and do something unusual that other games aren't doing. Number 3 is going to sound obvious if you already do it, but this is to start with your own limitations. Try and rule out ideas that come in that do not fit with that. When people are really new to the craft of games, they go over the top with the scope of what they're trying to do, because when people are novices at things, they don't know what they don't know, so they have ideas that basically are unachievable for them at their current level. And even when people have made dozens and dozens of games, it's often beneficial for them to think in this way, starting from the point of view of what do I know I can do, what can't I do, and what's sort of in the middle. Now, a skills audit is a process of kind of sitting down and thinking about that and thinking about what you're capable of doing, and it's sort of like working out what resources you have for a project. You might have an artist, but not someone who can animate a walk cycle, and that means you can make a game that has portraits of characters talking, but not characters walking around. If that was one of your constraints, it might actually push you down a road where you ideate around concepts that are actually more unique and interesting. The first time you think about it, you might think, well, that's terrible, I have to have animated characters in my game, but Dredge doesn't, and that has sold more
Melzy
than
already said hi to you.
copies, and Mini Metro doesn't have any characters in, not even portraits, and that sold more than 5 million copies. Setting restrictions on what sort of ideas you take seriously and really start to develop can help you cut out 90% of ideas. Then you're just left with the ideas you can actually execute, and you can start to think of variations on those. If we know it's easier to make a game with a boat than a game with a human that walks, then what are all the different ideas that could use a game with a boat? And going back to points 1 and 2, if you have personal experience of boats and sailing and the culture around boats, then you're now in a position where you've got an unfair advantage, and you can have better ideas in that area than other people might. Number 4 is something I'm going to call find the fun and then retheme. Sometimes games do start with a IP, they start with characters and a story and all of that side of things, and some games start the other way round. They start with mechanics and systems.
What do you mean?
And things like world building.
You were not scammed one of those times.
Layered in later
I
on.
sent you the
In
link.
most cases, we generally feel like mechanics and
I mean, I would never
story
scam my
should
chat.
reinforce each other, at least to the degree that the
My food's heading to me. It'll be here
setting
soon.
and story make the game easier to understand and play. And one of the ways to make sure that your mechanics and your theme are
I did not scam you at one point. I haven't taken it yet, but now that you mentioned it,
your gameplay to not be
Taking
too
it.
wedded to your theme, to
Look at
not
that.
be too
I
precious
took it.
or against the idea of
Now what?
changing what your game is fundamentally supposed to be about, because it might emerge while you're developing it that a certain thing is more fun than another thing. A fantastic real example of this is the game Ape Out. Now, the developer Gabe Cozillo started off making a top-down ninja-based stealth game, but as he was developing it, he found out that the mechanics of grabbing characters and pushing them were really fun to play around with. It made more sense if the player character was a big, heavy, strong thing, and the opponents were smaller, weaker things with ranged attacks. Kuzilo had an initial idea, started developing it, focused on the gameplay, and then when he saw interactions that were fun, he tried to make them bigger and more prominent, and then changed the theming and the setting and the character to accommodate that more. Through that process, he was able to leave behind a pretty uninspired ninja game that might have gone completely under the radar, and instead he made the best ultra-violent jazz-driven guerrilla game of 2019. Number 5 on my list is to fix a perceived problem with a genre or with a type of game. Warcraft 3 was special when it came out because it was the first real-time strategy game to have such a strong emphasis on characters and story, really. And when George Chan designed Plants vs. Zombies, he was trying to solve the problem of how do you make an ultra-casual tower defense game that is basically marketed to people who've never played a tower defense game. These are examples of designing around some sort of perceived problem, which is what happens in most design fields outside of games as well. How do I make a chair that looks unique? How do I make a car that's more efficient? Design problem doesn't need to aim to make something world-changing, but it can be really helpful to have one because, again, it will help you narrow down and focus what you're looking for. For example, take a genre that you don't like and try to figure out what you would need to change in order for you to like a game in that genre. Maybe it could use more simplicity in one area and more complexity in another. Maybe it just needs a change of tone or a re-theme and a different kind of setting. You don't have to know the solution from the beginning, that's not the point, but making some kind of problem statement can be a really good way to come up with unique ideas for different takes on a type of game. Also, whatever problem you identify at this stage can help to orient the game towards a underserved target market. I know this all sounds a bit dry and businessy, but if you are imagining people who might enjoy this type of game but they need it to be more complex or more relaxing or whatever, then you're already in a good place for your marketing because you know how to describe the unique appeal of what you're designing. Designing with a problem in mind can be really helpful. It's a good introduction to general design thinking, which can be used in other industries, and in indie games it's another way to make sure that the ideas you come up with actually have some merit to them and aren't just a copy of something else. Number 6 is to try and write down your ideas as a single sentence pitch. It basically starts with you thinking of what your goal is in the game and then describing it and a couple of the actions that you do in the game. If you can't describe those things, you don't really have a game idea. For example, if I told you I want to make a game about teenage superheroes, I haven't said anything about the gameplay there. All I've told you is a setting. Thinking in terms of broad themes can be helpful at certain points of the project, but we're here to learn game design, and that means thinking about what the player is actually doing. Your player needs to understand the overall goal of what their player character is trying to do in the game world, and then a few examples of the actions they do to achieve that. So for example, in Into the Breach, my overall goal is to save the human cities. Some of the actions I take to achieve that are to destroy the kaiju and to upgrade my mechs so that I'm better at destroying the kaiju.
Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
In Stardew Valley, my goal is to try and create a prospering farm. Some of the actions I can take in order to achieve that goal are to raise livestock, to grow crops, and to befriend the townsfolk. Those games have more elements than that, and I'm sure your game ideas will have more elements than that. But the point is, if you can't write a single sentence that describes the main goal and some of the actions that the player will be doing most of the time, then you probably don't really have a game idea. You have a story or a setting idea. If you can't describe your games in terms of goal and a few actions that you take to try and meet the goal, then you're more likely to get confused when you start trying to develop that game and not know what to focus on and just jumping here and there between developing mechanics and systems without the game really having a core appeal. Once you've cracked this format, you can probably sit down and write down every game idea you've ever had in a long list and then see which ones of them actually have enough to them to be worth pursuing. The purpose of this exercise is it's kind of sorting wheat from chaff. It's letting you know which of your game ideas are actually ideas for games and which ones are just vague ideas about a story. But another additional reason why it's good to practice describing gameplay in this kind of concise and very structured way is that it is often how games are described in marketing copy. And if your ultimate goal is to be a self-employed indie developer, then that's one of the many hats that you have to wear, is the marketing copywriter. Ugh. Number 7 on my list is designing for moments. Now, if you're a nerd like me, you probably have a favorite board game designer, and one of my favorite board game designers is Eric Lang. He's made a lot of very drama-driven, beautiful board games with lots of big pieces, and he's also made the board game translations of lots of video games. He basically says that he tries to design for memorable moments. So he would imagine some gamers in a game store talking to each other about a game, and one of them is recounting what happened in their playthrough, and he thinks of what those exciting descriptions would be like and then tries to design the game that creates those memories. Now, that might sound a bit wishy-washy, but it is a brilliant example of what people refer to as player-centered design or experience-focused design. You're not making a game to satisfy your own curiosity about learning a game engine. You can do that, but if you're here to make games that other people want to play, then you need to focus on their experience. You can put any amount of game mechanics or any amount of content into a game, variations in weapons and levels and resources or whatever. But if your game isn't generating those memorable moments, then people are going to forget it. Players will love or leave your game based on whether it generates those kind of memorable moments for them, whether they're playing it alone or with other people. And I'm adding this to the list because it might be a way of thinking that is quite new to you. Some of the techniques I gave you earlier on in the list, like drawing from your own experience, are designer-centered approaches. But when you're coming up with ideas, or when you're sorting through your existing ideas and trying to work out which ones are good, this player-centric approach can be really helpful. And if you're sitting staring at a document that has 10 games that you want to make in it and you're trying to pick one, maybe the one where you can imagine the joy that players will get out of it or how it will make them feel is the best one to pursue. We're nearly at the end of this list, and so far the previous 7 techniques have all been things that I've used myself, or that I've seen work in industry, or that I've seen work for my students. They're not necessarily things from a textbook. Now, the 8th item on the list is a bit more of a formal system for generating ideas or trying out different ideas, but it's a system that has 7 things in it. So I guess this extra content is your reward for having enough of an attention span to stick around this far into the video, or maybe it's just because I thought 14 methods didn't have as much of a ring to it. What we're going to look at now is something called the scamper technique, and some of these things are going to remind you of stuff I said earlier in the video, and some of them will be brand new. The great thing about scamper is you can use it with an idea you're already working on to try and get unstuck and to improve elements of it or make it more interesting in general, or you can use it to generate totally new ideas, often by starting with a game you like. Scamper isn't specifically for games, it's a general design practice, but bear with me and let's see if we can get it to work. So the S in Scamper stands for substitute, and this is simply taking one part of the thing and replacing it with something else. So it could be retheming a game to be a different thing, or it could be taking one mechanic out and replacing it with something else. It's kind of self-explanatory. The C in Scamper is for combine. It's kind of down to you how you do this, but you could be combining 2 genres together, probably end up with a game that's too complicated to make, but it's one example. But there are ways of combining things in games that actually streamline them and make them more elegant. For example, what about a game where experience points and gold are basically the same currency? Oh, hang on, that's all of the Dark Souls games. A is for adapt. Adapting a game means imagining it being used for a different purpose or in a different context.
Alright, my food got delivered. I'll be right back.
Example here would be, how do you take a horror game like Resident Evil and make it age appropriate for younger kids, but keep the general approach to scaring people the same? M is for modify, but To be honest, most of the things on this list are modifications, so I find that letter a bit of a problem. The other thing people sometimes substitute here is magnify, which is a very helpful concept in game design. Magnify is a bit like the ape out example I gave earlier, where the developer saw that grabbing and pushing were fun, so they made that the whole game. It's kind of zooming in on one element of the game design, excluding the stuff that isn't as fun and putting the emphasis on what is fun, or at least what is interesting. Magnifying one element of the experience isn't just about gameplay, it can have thematic and storytelling and emotional reasons as well. For example, if you're making a game where a vampire is the hero, you might want to minimize how much time the player spends sucking blood and instead focus on the innate vulnerability of the vampire and the fact that they burst into flames when they go out in the sun.
took my drink.
Entire game about avoiding sunlight instead of all of the different aspects of being a vampire. P is for purpose, or for put to another use. Imagine the thing you're designing being used for something other than entertainment. Like, could your game function as a piece of educational material or as something that's cathartic or therapeutic for people? When you do imagine it in that context, does that influence what parts of the design you find interesting? Now, I think the P is quite hard to implement for most of us because I think most of us making indie games just want to make a fun game. But if you do have aspirations of making a game that is art, or making a game that is a accurate historical record of a particular time or place, then this is definitely worth thinking about. What if your game ended up in a classroom? How does that change how you think about it as you're making it? E is for eliminate, or the baby brother of eliminate, which is minimize, the opposite of maximize. So what am I reducing in my design so that players can focus on other things? Grand Theft Auto would be a very different game if I had to serve all my prison time in that game in real time. The time that the characters spend in jail is a minimized element of the game because it doesn't serve the core fantasy of running around doing crimes like a maniac. To use the eliminate/minimize tool, you could generate a bunch of game ideas that are basically the title
I'm not
of a game.
reporting this entire
and
thing
the
as missing, so
without,
whatever.
And then what you're taking out of the game. Skyrim without magic, Fortnite without building, a platformer without saving or lives.
I'm adjusting my tip.
So on. I will go
They still
on
make
and
drink.
on about minimalism on this channel, but I think if you're making indie games, particularly if you're making one on your own, then this way of thinking is really important to lock into, because taking stuff out can end up with a game that is more interesting than what you were trying to do, and it can also make your game easier to make. For example, think of inventory systems. Okay, it might be unrealistic to have a Mario-style inventory system.
No, they care about their
where you
rating
carry
more,
one backup
so.
item, but at the same time,
You
it
lost
might
a
lead to way
star.
more interesting decisions about which item I drop and which item I pick up.
Also, we're gonna watch a more fun video while I'm eating. We're gonna pause this. We're going to watch. Tempting.
The franchise might not be back, but I sure am. I don't know if you've heard, but The Bachelorette
Eating
has been getting
time.
some well-deserved negative press as of late. The video I made last year on The Bachelorette has only become more relevant, which is not great, but it does prove that I'm right. As of right now, it seems unclear whether the franchise will even continue into the future. The most recent season of The Bachelorette has yet to air, Maybe we'll never air. Who knows? Somehow I do think we'll all live and we'll all be okay if that's not the case. But among the many things that the recent news has made me think about, I really became fixated on a story I've been wanting to tell y'all for a while. You may know that The Bachelorette is no stranger to controversy, and it just had me thinking about what was simultaneously one of the best seasons of The Bachelorette and also, without a doubt, one of the most cursed seasons. I would like to share with y'all season 16 of The Bachelorette. Picture this. It's 2020. Everyone's in lockdown. Millions are dying, mass civil unrest and social upheaval. Everyone's weirdly obsessed with putting items in resin. I know, in this moment, everyone's first thought was, how does this impact The Bachelorette? And more importantly, did Pilot Pete start the COVID-19 pandemic? Because he has yet to answer that question. After a historic run with Hannah Brown and Pilot Pete, whether successful or not, this franchise was no doubt on a high. Maybe this wasn't so much a show about finding love anymore, but it certainly was a great show to watch grown men throw baloney at each other.
This is a pile of baloney. Look at that.
Needless to say, expectations were high for this next season, but as we all know, this wasn't going to be a normal season. And because of that, it's also not a story that I can tell in chronological order. So stick with me here. The Bachelorette was set to film its 16th season in March of 2020. Filming was of course pushed back to July of that year, and in that time, many a potential D-lister male influencer left the cast. Matt James beefed with members of Bachelor Nation because he started a cameo before he was even on the show. You know, most people have the decency to charge $50 for a birthday message after their 15 minutes of fame. Brett Engelman left the cast to taste the fruity pebbles of his future wife Demi from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Since she wants to be petty, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and say that Grandpa Brett likes to like it's dirty soda, and he gulps it down like water, and that's what Fruity Pebbles is.
You know, they met when he was 25 and she was 9, so it just made sense, what can I say? But there still were over 30 men who remained willing and able to secure a spot on Bachelor in Paradise.
Whoa. Super happy about getting that off.
So they quarantined for 2 weeks at their new location, La Quinta Resort.
Pulling up to La Quinta Resort and Club, and it's amazing.
Not to be confused with La Quinta Hotels, the mid-tier hotel chain one stays at out of desperation after Delta Airlines delayed your flight 4 hours then canceled it. This place is a little different. It has a pool, it has a golf course.
It's amazing.
Now they couldn't access the golf course because of course lockdown procedures, but trust, this hotel was okay. When you compare the COVID Bachelorette seasons to the COVID Bachelor season, the budget difference is actually astounding. Regardless, the men documented this 2-week journey most often by jumping on their beds, hitting their head on the very low ceilings, and resting to repeat the cycle once more the next day. And I do love the very of its time dramatic display of them taking their last COVID tests, teary-eyed and all. Finally, they were just one COVID test away from launching their influencer careers. You can only imagine the humiliation felt by the men who got kicked out the first night, who not only waited 4 months for the show, but also stayed in complete isolation, only to make small talk with a guy wearing a pregnancy belly and no socks with his dress shoes. The stakes had truly never been higher at La Quinta Resort and Club. There was, however, a problem. On top of, obviously, COVID being a problem, production realized just a little bit too late that actually a key factor in manipulating their cast is the pure disorientation, jet lag, skydiving dates. These people who stayed at the La Quinta Resort were just not in the mood to be produced. They did not care to pretend to like The Bachelorette. They did not care to waste any time. And when their first Bachelorette, yes, the first Bachelorette of the season, Claire picked her final man the second he walked out the limo, Bachelor Nation needed to call in the big guns. Someone to wow these socially isolated horn dogs who could also quarantine locally without delaying production. They needed Tayshia Adams. For those of you who only consume Bachelor content through my recaps, first of all, you're so valid. You also may remember Tayshia became the first woman in history to chase after a man living in his parents' house in Maryland. That man, of course, being, you all know him, John Paul Jones. Tragically, though, as most Bachelor Nation couples go, this pairing didn't last beyond their contractual obligation to say that they were together. Tayshia first appeared on Colton seasons of The Bachelor with Hannah Brown. Despite making it to the final 3, she was not considered for the role of the Bachelorette at the time because, you know, the Bachelorette had already had one black Bachelorette like 4 years ago. You can't expect them to have another. Oh my god. Some say it was because there were rumors she had a boyfriend before the show, which I actually at this point think is a requirement to be a lead on the franchise. That didn't stop them from casting Pilot Pete or
another more recent bachelorette. Maybe it just adds to the spice, I don't know. I know Jed was just fuming. So the fact that she wasn't initially considered at all was crazy to me. This woman has lore. She was married previously and divorced her husband after she found out he'd been cheating on her for months. She was hit by a truck in 2008, spent 2 months learning how to walk again, only to be hit again by a car in 2011. I'm telling you, someone was after this poor woman. She also, I think, had a lot of very key characteristics to being a good lead in this franchise. She's got a real like princess quality about her. She's uncontroversial, she's likable, she can carry a conversation and not say a single controversial thought. And I think every straight woman would want the reaction that Tayshia got when she walked into that room as the new bachelorette. Like, she's gorgeous. These men were awestruck, joyous, and were very quick to tell her, even knowing nothing about her, that they already liked her way more than that other stinky bachelorette who was just there.
I like her way more than Claire already.
You can't deny, you know, the beauty.
No, you're like more my type, my style in every way, so
Really? Trust me, you have never seen a group of men so damn chipper in your life. Despite being a last-minute swap on a season with a roughly $2 budget, I would say, Tayshia gave truly, I think, the last season of The Bachelorette, where there were multiple good options for her to choose from. The bar is low. Damar, severely underrated, not nearly enough screen time.
Took me back like a kindergarten crush. T.A., she's my caffeinated rush.
Riley, a lawyer, aka a person with a real job.
What do you do?
I travel quite a bit for work and for pleasure.
Cool.
What about you?
I am a medical malpractice defense attorney in New York City.
Who connected with her about their love for family and kids. Blake, a historic Bachelorette contestant who has managed to date not 1, not 2, but 4 different bachelorettes and is still single. So the odds that he snuck on Taylor Frankie Paul's season are low, but not 0. There were multiple times this season where Tayshia would send a man home and he would come crawling back, begging for her. She has an aura. But since Tayshia was coming in basically partway through the season, Claire had already sent men home. So they needed to grow 4 more contestants in a lab just for her, 2 of which we never see again. First came Noah, a man from Oklahoma, ahead of his time with the mustache, much to the distaste of the other men around him.
It's totally unremarkable.
It just doesn't fit his face.
I don't understand it.
Then Spencer, who had the disrespect to ask what happened to the last bachelorette when he walked in.
So which one of you guys scared away Claire?
Too soon, buddy. Watch yourself. Spencer, though, he wasn't threatened. He secured that first impression rose despite being what Riley would call lunch meat.
We call you lunch meat.
Man, it's fried bologna sandwich with the mayonnaise.
Like most lunch meat, though, Spencer simply did not last.
Maybe in a little
Hung
bit.
around in the background for a few episodes.
R is for rearrange or reverse, which is reasonably self.
Today I want to talk to you about the idea that you should make small games. So why do people give you this advice in the first place? But more importantly, why is it so hard to follow? Because even if you know why you should make small games, a lot of people just still try and do these big over-ambitious projects anyway. So, you know, I'm going to talk through these different perspectives. Why do people give you this advice? And I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what this advice is for. A lot of the time is that, you know, people will say, oh, you should make smaller games because you'll finish them. And that is true. That is part of the reason why you should make small games, is if you set out to make a game that you think will take 6 months, it will actually take a year, right? So if you set out to make a game that only takes 1 month, you're going to have a game in 2 months, right? There is a certain amount of it that is about manageability and just making sure that you can make the things that you want to make. But I think the real reason that a lot of people giving you advice will gloss over is simply that if you try to make a big thing, then your attention is going to be divided by all of these smaller parts of that big thing. So if you try to make Stardew Valley, you've got to write a good story, you've got to create a good user interface and a good inventory system, you've got to, you know, create so many different things. If any one of those parts of your game is not up to the standard of another game in the market that does the same things better, then that game is going to be a failure, right? People are not going to play your game. They're not going to choose to play your game when there is another game that costs the same or less that does all of those things better. So if your goal is to make games to sell, and because you want people to play what you make, then your goal should be to make something of high quality, right? And you're always going to get the higher quality thing by trying to do less to a higher level of quality. So one of the reasons you should make small games and shouldn't set out to make large games until you've made a few small games is basically the smaller your game is, the higher quality each part of that game can be, and that means that your game has a higher chance of success. The amount of care and time and polish that you can put into that game is going to be way higher
Smells
than
smells.
trying to make
Who
a
said
30
that?
hour or a
Oh my
300-hour game with the same resources, right? So think about the end quality of what you're trying to produce. If you want to make games and sell them and for people to notice them and care about them and want to play them, then your goal should always be to be as good as the other things in your target category. And if you make your target category 300-hour RPGs, then you're basically fighting with things like Baldur's Gate and stuff like that, which is... I know some people have these projects that they work on for years and years and years. They just keep adding stuff to it. And if you're doing that as a hobby and that's your hobby project, then that's fine. But it's not necessarily how you make a high quality game that other people will care about. Now, a lot of you will have heard everything I just said before. Someone will have told you this. But I think the place where a lot of us fall down is like, how do I actually action that? You know, I had a very humbling experience with this recently where I started trying to teach myself Godot because the only engine I really know how to use very well is Game Maker, and I thought it would be nice to have an engine that can do 3D to a higher standard, so I thought I'd start learning Godot. And I came across this problem that every idea I had was too ambitious. You know, I wanted to do an RTS. I wanted to do things that were way ahead of my skill curve straight away, and I can't because actually an RTS requires me to know how to manipulate lots of different things in the game. So I empathize with the idea that it is hard to have ideas for small games, but I think one of the reasons for this is that a lot of us just do not play enough small games, right? So we just don't have a reference point. Minute is a great example of a small game. This is like probably the most minimalist interpretation of Zelda that you could come up with. But you die every 60 seconds and then you go to the last checkpoint, and it's just a really good example of how you would make a very, very minimalist Zelda, I think. Rimmed Capsule, I don't know if you've ever played this. It's a little sort of mini RTS game where you're building a base out of tetronymos and then getting attacked, and the different color rooms do different stuff. And again, it's just a really neat way of taking a genre that's normally really big and too complicated and simplifying it so that it's easier to make, easier to do the kind of the visual design of it because it doesn't have people to animate, all of those kind of things. And what's this? Downwell, another good example of a very small game. And I mean, there's hours and hours and hours of gameplay in this game, but because the game is limited to moving downwards, it just removes certain other things that would have made this a much bigger project for the developer to complete. And Mini Metro, another example of a game that just doesn't have any kind of representations of characters or people in it. There's been some really good interviews with the developers of Mini Metro where they talk about how it came about. I'll leave a link to the game developer article, but they basically talk about when they made the initial Mini Metro game. It was for lumindaeva, I think it was for a game jam. And they basically set themselves a bunch of limitations on what sort of idea they would have for the game jam in the first place. So they basically said, we don't want to have to animate characters, right? So what is a game that allows us to not have characters? We also don't want to do loads of level design, loads of bespoke levels, which you think of certain types of games, they require levels, right? So if you say, I'm going to make a platformer, right? Unless you're making an endless runner that is generating the levels, you've set yourself up to be in a position where your game requires levels. That's how it gets its kind of longevity from. When they were making Mini Metro, they set themselves a kind of constraint, a limitation to say, our game will not have lots of consecutive levels with different content in them. And the eventual game they made does sort of veer away from that a little bit, but in order to make the initial game, they had these constraints, right? No characters, no levels, what can we make? And you get this game that has sold millions and millions of copies because it's worked with a set of constraints that allow it to be a good game. If you don't set yourself constraints, then you end up doing loads of stuff that you're not good at. You say, oh well, I'm not going to hire an animator and I can't animate, but I want to make a game about a character running around. Well, you've just shot yourself in the foot because you've made this decision to make a type of game that you're incapable of making, and then you're just kind of hoping that the end quality of that thing will be decent, right? Again, that's fine if you're doing game jams and you're just learning and you're making games just to try stuff out. That's totally fine. But if you're making games because you want to make a good game, one of your starting points should be to try and constrain yourself or limit yourself based on what you know you can do well. So once you've got some constraints, then you can start to look at games that use the same constraints and get inspiration from them. Because part of the problem with the advice that tells people to make smaller games is, as I said, you don't have a reference point. So when you're just sitting there daydreaming about games, you're thinking about The Witcher, and you're thinking about Slay the Spire, and you're thinking about all of these great games you've played. You're not coming at it from the point of view of a craftsperson and thinking, what can I make? Okay, how do I make the best version of that? You're coming at it from the point of view of a gamer and thinking, what is a game? It has quests, it has loot, it has all of these things. If you come at it from the point of view of a craftsperson, you would basically start your project by saying, what do I know how to do? You know, what can I do to a decent level of quality? What do I not know but want to learn that I can incorporate into this project? And then what are the things that I just flat out know that I can't do, right? And I see so many games on this channel where, quite frankly, the weakest part of the game is something that the developer just doesn't have any skills in. Maybe they're a programmer and they've done all the art themselves, and they've just been too ambitious with the art and it's not something they can pull off, and their game has suffered. And it's like, well, you either needed to get an artist or seriously concentrate on learning art, or you needed to come up with an idea in the first place that didn't require you to make whatever part of the art is troubling them, like didn't need you to create characters, right? You know, I think Dredge is another example of this, because you don't have any 3D modeled characters that exist in the game world. If you were building Dredge, right, if you'd come up with this game and you were building it, you could have made so much of this game before you put these little character illustration portraits in. Yeah, it's a game that has a world with people in it, but the people are not actually represented as little models walking around. And that's another example of just having a constraint across the whole game that then makes the game easier to produce, because you're saying, we are not animating 3D characters walking around, we're only animating boats and creatures. That is like the craftsperson's or the craftsman's way of looking at things. What do I already know how to do? What do I want to learn how to do? And what am I so bad at that should just not be included in this project? A lot of developers don't do that part. They just try and do everything even if they can't, and then later on they end up with this game and they're like, oh, I might as well stick it on Steam. And there's some element of it, maybe it's the art, maybe it's the storytelling, maybe it's the interface or the sound design, just some element of it that is so weak because this person is trying to do something they have no skills in. And these problems are all ones that we can fix by practicing design by constraint. The idea that you are designing something based on a set of limitations that you think up beforehand, right? So in Mini Metro's case, the limitations are there are no characters visible in the world, there are not loads of levels, and so on and so on. So what I'm going to do now is try and give you some sort of examples of how I would think this problem through as I approach like starting a new game. So what I want to do is come up with a constraint that doesn't stop my game being good, but stops my game becoming larger than it should be or more complex than it should be. So I'm going to pick a constraint that limits a bunch of other stuff in my game. And then after that, we can start to look for other games that have the same constraint and to get ideas from them, right? So my first constraint, I don't want to do a story, right? I just want to focus on making a game and making a fun experience, and I don't want to tell a story at the same time. And I would always advise people who are new game developers or on their first 2 or 3 games is pick one. Pick a lane. Learn how to tell stories or learn how to make games and make fun game mechanics. You can combine those things later on, but most people do not have what it takes to combine them both from the start. It's just too much extra work. You don't need to be trying to learn both those skills at the same time. So I'm not making a story game. That's one of my first constraints. That cuts off loads of things. It means I don't have to do dialogue boxes or anything like that. If the game I'm making becomes good, then later on maybe I can layer some of this stuff in and I can start to think about how characters talk to each other and stuff in the world. But for the purpose of the new idea, we're throwing that out the window to start with, because ultimately we're trying to protect my time, my sanity, by not setting out to make something too big before I even know that the thing is good, right? That's the proper way to do game development, is prove an idea with playtesters before you try and build it into something big. You know, even if, you know, when people say make small games, you sort of roll your eyes and say, no, I'm ambitious, I want to make a big thing. Even if that's the case, your big thing should start as a small thing. Time and time again on this show, I get sent games where people have made so much content, so many levels, and what they really needed to do was nail down the core of their game in a single level or two levels, like a very small vertical slice of their game. Make that really, really good, and make sure it's something that people can get excited about before they invested more time in making that into a bigger game. It makes me really sad to see these big projects that people have worked on in isolation for months or years and just keep adding more and more content to, and are basically polishing a turd because they are adding content to something that no one wants content for because the core gameplay isn't there. So even if your goal is to make a big thing with loads of content, loads of levels, loads of playtime, your initial goal should still be to make a small version of that thing. So all of this stuff still stands. Even if you don't agree with the make small games first rule, then even if you want to make big games, you should be starting off with making a smaller version of that game and testing it before you make loads of extra stuff for it. So my first constraint, no story. We can worry about story content later on when we know that our game is actually a game and that people want to play it. But my big mechanical constraint here is going to be single screen. I haven't really thought this through yet. I just gut feeling that is going to be a good constraint that leads to lots of other constraints. Because it means that we don't have to make levels so much as kind of arenas. And then what I'm going to do now is basically kind of create a brainstorm of games that have this same constraint. So again, remember, we're trying to think like a craftsperson, right? We want to make something good. We want to make something that is within our skill set and expands our skill set, but doesn't pull us into territory where we're doing stuff that we're going to absolutely suck at, right? So rather than starting from the point of view of what do I want to make or what do I find interesting, that can come back later. I'm not saying ignore your own interests, but what I'm going to do is, now we've got this constraint of a single screen game, just kind of do a mood board here of collecting other games that share this constraint. And by single screen, I mean like a game where you never move out of the same location and it's always on the same screen, right? And I'm going to just see how many games I can find that fit that criteria, because that might give us some interesting ideas from the get-go. So Overcooked, I think, fits this bill very well. That's a single screen game, but it's a multiplayer game that only works as a multiplayer game. That's fine, but it still gives us a model for the types of interactions that might be cool in a single screen game, even if it was a one-player game. And going back a bit further, we could think of something like Bomberman. You've got very abstract games like Puzzle Bobble, not to be confused with Puzzle Bobble. We've got stuff like Bubble Bobble, this kind of thing where characters are in a single screen arena and it's kind of like a combat platformer. So if I was to try and remake any of these 4 games, I'd not need to move cameras around. I'd not need to make loads of levels, because I could just make this one environment and playtest the core concept of my game loads and loads before I start worrying about making other arenas or levels or those kind of things. Even with these few examples, there's some stuff to think about here, you know. There's a framing to the arena of like why we can't go outside and do other stuff. There's always a wall around it that kind of helps to explain why this is a single screen game. And I think if I add a theme to my game, because I've got my constraints up here. Let's say pirates, right? Now, our pirate game examples, loads of stuff in them, and, you know, quite frankly, games that were made by massive teams of dozens, if not hundreds of people, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to replicate that. So if I want to make a game about pirates, because that's my theme and that's the thing that I enjoy, how can I combine these things? How can I make pirates and single screen work together? Well, if I look at these other games, they all have an in-world reason why the game is a single screen. They have a wall or a border around the outside. So if I start to kind of think of my theme and my constraint together, I can start to think, well, actually, the border around the outside of a level or whatever could also be the sea, right? So if I made a game that is about being on an island, then we are making the theme and the constraint work together. So we've got a logical reason why our game is single screen, and it ties into the theme of it being a pirate-based game. So imagine I've got a single screen and it is representing an island of some sort. I'm gonna put some palm trees on there. Let's find a transparent PNG of a palm tree. Amazing. Look at that. 10 out of 10. Would hide my treasure here. Oh yeah. I will grant this is a very weird way of designing a game, but you can start to see how this way of approaching things would benefit you, right? Because having the constraint, like my game will be single screen or my game won't contain characters or whatever it is, you can then put that in conversation with your theme and you can start to make decisions that combine these two things, so that then your constraint starts to make sense, right? Because whatever the gameplay is on Doc's Cool Island, the single screen constraint makes sense because the water is cutting off the edges of the island. You know, it might have some bays and stuff like that in it. You can then, it kind of looks like a piece of cheese. Single screen isn't the only constraint you could come up with. Your constraint could be there's only one weapon in your game. You know, your character has one gun. It could be that your game has no characters, that you never represent characters, you only show vehicles and buildings. That's another constraint. That's kind of how Dredge works. And the point is, once you've got that constraint and you loosely know what the theme of the game is that you're trying to make, these can start to talk to each other and produce things like this, right? And by this I just mean the fact that we have an island that takes up most of the screen and we have no reason to like pan our camera away or need to do anything fancy with that. So we've got a constraint that makes our lives easier as developers because we're not making like massive environments that we have to travel across and have variety in and so on. But we're doing it in such a way that it makes sense to the player, because you always need a player facing reason to do things, right? You might do a thing because it's easier for you to do, right? You say, well, we're going to do this art style and not this art style because I'm better at this art style. But you still need a player-facing reason for that. So the player-facing reason should be that this art style is more exciting or more evocative, or no one's done a game like this with this art style in before, right? The constraint side of things, like I made a game with no characters because I can't draw characters, that's not a selling point for a player. A player needs a reason that is about them for these things to be. So, you know, if we go back to Dredge as an example, you have no physical 3D characters in Dredge, right? And that might be a constraint that was initially there to make the game easier to make, but that is not a reason why a player would like it, right? So you have to think of the difference between your constraints that are there to make your development easier and how you translate that into something that a player is going to like. Now, I would say in Dredge, the thing that you end up with is a very charming world that looks kind of toy-like, and that plays really nicely with the horror themes of the games because they're kind of contrasting. So by having this constraint, they've created a world that kind of feels like a toy, and then that kind of gives some of the game its mood and so on. But when you have a constraint like no characters or the game takes place on a single screen, you then have to put it in conversation with your game's theme and then make decisions that incorporate both the developer constraints and the appealing theme. Because players don't care about what's easier for you as a developer to do. They care about their own experience. And what you're trying to do is find the ideal world where your constraints line up with the theme. So if I decide that I'm making a pirate game and I'm making a single screen game, then I can think of an island as a sort of metaphorical way for justifying why my game happens on a single screen. So let's give another example here of, you know, a game which still uses the same theme and the same constraints, right? So another pirate game with a single screen. You know, we could have a single screen game about pirates where the entire game is based around a cross section of the ship. and you see it from the side, and you manage what's happening inside the ship, and it's like a little kind of fallout shelter type thing. Once we know this core gameplay of managing the ship is fun, we can expand that game out later, and we can have like choose your own adventure sections when you find an island and stuff like that. But the point is, we're still operating with this constraint on the main part of our game so that we can build this and test it and see if it's fun, right? This constraint is in place to make us focus so that we can make something fun and then expand it out later and add other sections or mini games or whatever, but not.
Oh, that's gonna
make
start
fun
already?
Something we concentrate on at the start.
3 hours.
I'm gonna call this game idea the HMS Indie Game Clinic. Very, very creative name for my ship. And yeah, you could see how this could make a sort of XCOM style or side view management game, right? Like this kind of thing. And then what do we do on an island? I don't know, I guess we look for treasure. Again, trying to kind of rub the theme and the constraint together and use that friction to come up with the game idea that is going to be executable. So if I have a map like this and I have pirates running around on it, players are playing as pirates, what are they doing? Well, I mean, the classic pirate activity to do on an island is to bury or find treasure. Maybe it's some kind of triangulation game where I pick up clues and they tell me, well, your treasure is somewhere north of the red thing, and it's somewhere east of the, or somewhere west of the blue thing, and then you use those arrows to find something. I don't know. You could go more down the Overcooked route where it's about picking things up and carrying them around, right? That's again, we again, after we've set the constraint, we look at other games that have a similar constraint and then we can see what they do. So if I'm doing a top down here, okay, maybe we can take some of the interactions from Overcooked, and it's like your character can pick up an item and hold it above their head, but they can only ever carry one item. And it's kind of sort of similar behavior to Bomberman actually as well, although Bomberman, it's always your bombs. So we could have a kind of treasure hunting game where you're running around the island digging stuff up, and then maybe taking it back to your ship. And that could be a really interesting setup for a multiplayer game, right? Running around on the island and digging stuff up and trying to take it back to their ship and avoiding sort of hazards. And then you can maybe also like steal people's treasure off them if they hit a hazard and drop it on the floor, right? So that's kind of using some elements of Overcooked, because if you've got the kind of single item inventory where you can carry something around and you can drop it. And I could see that could be quite fun if you were sort of playing around on this island, running around and then trying to find things and take them back to your ship, but the other player is trying to watch for when you get in trouble and come and steal your treasure off you, right? You can already see that at this stage I'm not really thinking about genre, because I'm trying to let everything come out of the constraint and the theme, right? And then we dip into other games and sort of think, well, how did they make running around on a single environment on one screen fun? And you start to kind of ask yourself these questions. Now, let's try and do a different constraint. So let's have no visible characters, right? And I'll put the theme away for now, but no visible characters. Games that don't have any characters that you can see. I mean, all walking simulators fall in this category, but you'd also include things like the Talos Principle, which is like a puzzle game. The thing is that this game actually has quite a lot of interesting story stuff in it, but it is not told through characters. So remember that games have what storytellers call narrative devices in, right? So ways of telling a story, and some of those ways of telling a story involve a 3D rendered character standing and talking to you, right? But that is an incredibly expensive way of telling a story, and that is why we get walking simulators. So games like Gone Home, you know, they don't have characters in them, or they don't have visible characters in the environment who talk to you, because they have been designed by constraints, right? The developer has realized that, oh, actually, we can create a story game that is just about learning about a character by being in their house. And we're not going to put any physical models of people in this. And then again...
Oh, I'm on my long break. Oh.
We have a theme, right?
Am I? No.
The
I
constraint.
hit stop instead of pause.
This is the developer constraint.
We'll do
of
some paralyzing.
We can't or we don't want to animate people, but we can do voiceover work and we can write and we can do all
When this
these other
video's
ways of
over.
telling a story. This is the player-facing, intriguing thing that makes use of the constraint to produce Gone Home. So remember, you can never just have this. This is for you as a developer to ensure that you are able to make something that you can make to a high quality. But it is not the thing that makes the game appealing, right? People who play walking simulators play them because they like the mood of the game, they like the environment, they like the story that is being told. They don't like them specifically because there are no characters in them. No characters is a developer constraint that comes from the fact that, you know, animating characters and doing their voiceover animations and everything is very, very difficult and expensive. But we couple that with a theme that is appealing to people. You know, in the case of Gone Home, it's about learning about a normal person by exploring their house while no one is there, right? And that is an appealing theme that justifies the developer constraint. You know, we get a similar thing in Talos Principle, sci-fi puzzle game. It has the same constraint as Gone Home. The appealing theme is, it's like a post-human.
Alright, I just remake this sheet.
Right? Nothing in your game should obviously be like, oh, I did it that way because it's easy. You can do things because they're easier for you, and you should do things that are easier for you. You should focus on things that you are good at. That stands to reason, and obviously you're going to do learning projects where you want to focus on things that you want to learn, but it should never be obvious that you did something to make your own life easier. You always need it to tie in with the stuff that makes the game appealing to a player, right? So the developer constraint of not having any visible characters is very clearly justified by the theme of the game. Pacific Drive has the same thing. No visible characters. How is it justified in the world? Well, it's a kind of stalker-inspired liminal zone. The theme justifies the developer constraints and works very well with them. It makes it creepier. This game would not be improved by adding facially animated characters that come up and talk to you. It would actually be lessened. Probably would make it worse, right? Mini Metro also has the no visible characters constraint, but it has an appealing theme, which is a transit simulation based on transit maps, right? And the map thing is really more the visual style of the game than the theme of the game, but we already had this association in our heads between this graphic design style and the theme of trains and transit systems, right? So again, the theme of it being a game about drawing things on a map and a game about trains allows it to be a game that doesn't just have no visible characters, but nothing that looks realistic, right? It's like a diagram. Like, could you make a game that looks like this but is actually about a fantasy world? No, it is the developer constraint working together with the theme, and the theme of it being trains makes this very simple art style make sense because it is evoking signs and maps and everything that we associate with trains, right? We can even expand some of this thinking out to some of the games that have featured on this channel. So right back in last summer, I saw this game Pterodentium, which is, oh, there I am. So sort of Pokemon-esque monster collection, monster battling game. And, you know, one of the problems for making this sort of game is people are always going to compare your game to Pokemon and want it to do everything to the same sort of size and scale that a Pokemon game would do it. So you have your developer constraint of can't make 500 creatures, right? Again, there are ways of marrying that constraint with a theme that makes up for it. The issue with making a Pokemon style character collection game is people expect 400 to 500 creatures. But if you change the theme to collecting things from a very limited pool of stuff that players understand is limited, like collecting dinosaurs, for example, If the theme is collecting dinosaurs, people are less expectant of it being Pokemon and having 4 creatures. If the theme is collecting undead creatures because you're playing as a necromancer, then again, people expect that category to have less stuff in it. So you've got a theme that is working with your constraint. But if you're trying to make a kind of Pokemon style game and you have this constraint of not being able to produce that many creatures, then you need to kind of make the theme work with that constraint. And I think in the case of this game, one of the things I sort of suggested was switching to a theme for the monsters so that it made sense why there were less monsters, and then people will be more accepting of that limitation. Another game I looked at right at the start of this channel, Sphero here, where you play as a ball. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with a game where players play as a ball. There have been a few games in this category that have been successful where players play as a ball, but they have a theme. So if we compare this, we've got Sphero, where player character is a geometric shape, right? To a player, this can look like a game where everything is built around this constraint, right? They wanted to make a platformer, they didn't want to animate a character, or they didn't have the skills to do that well, so they made a game with a ball. It just looks like a limitation, right? It's all based around a limitation. But we've got examples of games like Rock of Ages. Katamari is arguably a game where you play as a ball as well. And we've got Exo 1, which is like a beautiful kind of science fiction game where you are rolling a sort of egg-like object through space. These are all games where you play as quite a simple geometric object, but there is a theme, an appealing theme that explains that constraint, right? So over here, it's appealing theme and humor, and you can see it's in the title, Rock of Ages. It's a kind of history joke. That this has a historical theme. You can see it's going to be a game about smashing things and being a ball. It's all there in the title and the hero image. Exo 1, the appealing theme is like sci-fi environments. Yeah, and just kind of gliding through them in a nice way. And all of these things help to justify the fact that the player character is only a geometric shape. It's just a ball rolling around. But the issue that I found with Sphero was that there wasn't any reason why the player is a ball. And that means that players aren't going to be very forgiving of this. When they see this and they see what looks like placeholder art, they're going to say, this is placeholder art, this is a lazy developer, why should I play this? But if you just have a little bit of fiction to explain why this limitation is in the game, maybe it's a magical ball controlled by a wizard and you're the wizard and you're off screen, or it's, I don't know, there's lots of ways you can justify being a ball in a game, but you do have to justify it. That is a big part of what makes games work, is the theme that we give it, you know. But the point is really, whenever you have a decision in your game that you've made based on a developer constraint, like I can't animate characters, so I made my characters into a geometric shape, or I made game environments with no characters in, like all of these examples. Whenever you have a limitation like that, that's very sensible, because that is you working efficiently with your skills and resources available, but it doesn't justify itself. The player still needs an in-world reason why you have a game with no characters in it, or why you have a game where the characters are balls, and so on. It's not enough to just use your limitation and hope that people will be forgiving of it because you're a solo developer or whatever. That is generally not how people play games or consume media. They don't go to something of a low quality and say, well, actually this is fine because it was made by one person, and I'll cut them some slack because they made it all on their own. They go to something because it's appealing to them, and then if it's good and it was made by one person, then they might be impressed by that fact after. But they're not going to like cut you any slack as a solo developer just because they know you don't have resources available. So think about these couplings of blue and green boxes, where the blue is your developer constraints, like what you can or can't do based on who's in your team and what skills you have and all of this kind of stuff. Make smart decisions about what game to make based on your developer constraints, and then make sure that the theming of your game and the constraints of your game go together so that this is justified by this. And I think there is a small nuance here to be aware of, is that the thing that justifies the limitation needs to be appealing. It can't be a thing that's like buried away in the lore of the game, right? So if I say, oh, why does the character only have one gun? And the answer you give me is like some deep lore thing that you don't find out until way into the game or whatever. That's not a good enough reason. It needs to be a reason that you would see on the Steam splash page, right? The character only has one gun because the gun is their arm and it's built into their body. That's a reason that is kind of based in the fiction of the game's world, but it's also cool. It's cool that this character's arm is a gun, and that sets up the expectation that you're not going to be picking up 20 different guns in this game because the gun is part of you, but it does it through something that is appealing and cool, right? You know, all of these examples are like that. Like the Pacific Drive example, it is cool that you're on your own in this environment. I don't think this game wouldn't be better if it was like Far Cry and it had annoying NPCs wandering all over the place. It would be worse. So your thematic justification for your constraints needs to be something that's like front of mind, something that you would market the game around. You know, it's an abandoned home, it's creepy to go around in because no one is there. That's part of the mood of the game. It's not something we did just because we had this constraint of not being able to animate characters. It may be in reality, but it doesn't work. Just having this constraint on its own isn't an appealing thing. It's not going to make people play your game. So work with your constraints and then justify them through your game's fiction, and make sure that you have a reasonably scoped game because you've used these constraints and acknowledged them in the first place, but you don't use them as excuses to make an unappealing game. And the only way to do that is to make sure that all of your constraints are sort of justified by the game in a way that doesn't feel like hand wavy or like making an excuse, but actually ties into what's cool about the game. I'd be interested to hear whether some of you have already worked this way before, whether you've used this kind of methodology before. It might be something you just subliminally do. I think there are definitely people who try and do too much stuff, who try and make these very ambitious games with, like I say, maybe a story in when they don't have any proven storytelling skills, or, you know, types of art that they're not very good at, or whatever element of the game it is that is weak. And then there are those of us who have sort of imposter syndrome and maybe limit ourselves too much to only doing under ambitious things. It's a very difficult balancing act, and I'd be interested to hear how you've used constraints in your own design process when you're making games, and examples of other constraints. So we talked about not including visible characters in your game. And, you know, when I say no characters, I don't necessarily mean the character doesn't exist in the world, right? Like, there are games like Dredge or Sunless Sea, which are very vehicle-based games, where there are characters that are referred to constantly, but they are a portrait in the corner of the screen, someone that pops up in dialogue or something like that. And again, that's an example of a game where that story layer of characters that interact with you and talk to you can be added in later on once you know that the core of your game works. But even if your goal is ultimately still to make a very big game, you should be aiming to make a small game first that proves the concept of, like, people find this fun. You know, I've said it time and time again on this channel that spending more time on your game doesn't always make it better. Putting more features into your game doesn't always make it better. What makes a game better is following an iterative process of making things, testing them with an audience, making them, testing them with an audience, and just trying things out over and over again. And the more of these initial constraints you give yourself, the quicker you're likely to get to a point where you have tested an idea for a game, people seem to like it, people seem to want more of it, and then you can start to think about, how do I make this into a 10-hour experience? How do I make it into a 100-hour experience or whatever? But until you're really at that point, it's not worth sinking time into the additional content or adding a mini game or whatever it is. You know, I get sent so many games on this channel where there's just too much stuff being attempted at once, and they needed to just try and do half as many things to a higher degree of quality. Again, your players will be the end judges of your game, and if your game is doing lots of things poorly, then why should they play it, right? And this is why I keep coming back to this idea of researching other games and basing your games on games with similar constraints. And to kind of come back to the initial question of the video, I talked about why you should make smaller games. but I also tried to talk about why it's so hard to. Why are people so resistant to this idea?
I'm feeling
if they know
eepy.
it's the practical thing to do. One reason is that you just don't play.
I have done a lot.
We're
I've
so
done a lot, but I just feel very
every
eepy.
game, even
I'll say
like,
I'm almost done with my
indie games at the
planning for
moment
now.
being very polished and very
And we'll
solid
probably do
stuff
the
that
rest.
A lot of people just aren't exposed to enough small games to have anything to compare to. So you know they don't have an experience of playing a Downwell or a Bomberman or whatever. That lack of exposure to small games means
might
that
do the
your
rest of
only
this.
points of reference and your only inspiration are games that are made by massive teams that you couldn't possibly make something of that quality. I think this method that I've showed you today should help you with that, because by sort of starting with a constraint or starting with one or more constraints, like saying I'm not going to do a story because I can't do that yet, and I don't have skills in that, and I'd need someone else to help me if I wanted to do that really well. Setting some other constraints like having no characters, or making the game take place in a single screen, or even just, you know, only making one level, right? If you're making an action game, just only commit to making a single level game and don't make any more of it until people are excited and want to see more of that game, right? That should be your proof of it's time to continue this project, it's time to make it bigger. But you should never kind of set out to spend 3 years on a game until you've made a prototype that people are excited about and want to play. I do think YouTube is a particularly bad environment for this, because there are so many developers on here making logs of their games where they seem to be working on the same game and polishing it for months and months and months and years and years and years. No evidence of any playtesting, right? It's just a feedback loop of people from YouTube saying, oh, your game looks nice, and it's just like visually it looks nice, and that's not how you tell something's going to be fun. The thing I'm trying to encourage you to do here is to bring down the scope of your ideas so that you can create things to test whether something is fun and appealing. And only once you've made something and tested whether it's fun or appealing, and you've got like a decent response from people, then you can start thinking about how to make that smaller game into either a very polished small game, right? A game that only has a few levels, but it's a really high level of quality. This is your kind of mini metros, games like Ape Out. These are all still relatively small games, but they're very, very polished. Or then you can start thinking about how you expand that out into a very long game with a story, or a very big game with lots of areas to explore. But you should never really be aiming to make that a big, long game until you know that you've got a compelling short game. And one of the saddest things I see on this channel when people send me their games are just these games that are intended to be big, long RPG experiences. And there's so much like broken or just uninteresting stuff in the core gameplay that I just think, why did you spend this much time on this? And it all fundamentally comes back to the idea that game design is not necessarily game development. They are slightly different things, and you can be developing a game for a very long time, i.e. opening up a game engine, deciding what to do, doing some programming, adding some art. That's all game development. And you can be developing a game for a very long time and never really designing it, because you're not thinking about the end user, or you're making lots of assumptions about the end user, or, as is more often the case, you're just never involving them at all. You're never testing things with people, or the classic one is only testing things with audiences who want you to feel good, so they tell you stuff is good when it's not. One of the best things you can do for yourself as any kind of creative, whether it's a game developer or writer or musician, is to find people that have the same kind of standards as you and want you to improve, and will tell you when something sucks a little bit. The situation you never want to be in is working on something for a long period of time and tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it and never letting anyone play it, because they are your quickest shortcut to understanding whether people are going to like this game further down the line. And if what you've made is not fundamentally exciting to people, and you don't get people in a state where they're like, no, I want to carry on playing, give me one more go, then your dream of making a bigger game needs to wait for a while until you can make a good small game. So the small games versus big games question is really a matter of quality. If you want to do anything to a high degree of quality, you have to be able to execute the fundamentals of that thing very well. games can be very repetitive. A lot of games ask us to do the same thing over and over again, and if your game doesn't have like a fun 5 minutes in it where people really enjoy doing that 5 minutes of stuff, then it doesn't need to be an hour, it doesn't need to be 10 hours until you've got to a point where that moment to moment is fun. Hopefully what I've shown you today gives you something that can help you to iterate faster, come up with better ideas. You know, a sensible game developer who wants to make things they can actually finish is gonna think about these developer constraints and base their ideas around this. You know, what can I and can't I do, and how should I limit my project based on that? But in order to take that and make it into something appealing, you need to marry these things together and make sure that the developer constraints make sense with the theme of the game and still allow the game to be exciting or appealing in some way. Thank you for watching. As is always the case, these videos are me thinking out loud about the game design process and giving suggestions of things that may work for you. Some of this stuff may just not be relevant to you. You may have found other ways of doing some of this stuff that just work better for you, and that's totally fine. If you disagree with anything I've said, feel free to leave a comment. But I work on the assumption that you're all adults and you can take or leave suggestions as they come to you. And if you don't find a suggestion useful, you can just move on rather than going, you're misleading people with these lies. As always, thanks to my patrons, both the people that subscribe on Patreon and our YouTube channel members. You are the people who currently make this channel possible. Doing this kind of more intermediate to master's level game design theory stuff on YouTube, it's not great algorithm bait. The kids don't like this stuff, so this channel is never going to make enough kind of AdSense revenue for me to be able to live on. So the monthly income we get from our patrons is really, really helpful, allows me to keep producing stuff like this. So thank you very much for those who've signed up already. That's also
That one. Watch.
One of the biggest
Watch this to end out
issues
stream.
that has long held back video games as an art form is the disconnect between game design and storytelling. Unlike other mediums such as literature, music, and film, video games continue to struggle to tell truly engaging stories. Even the best games the industry has ever produced rarely ever tell stories that truly say something or express an idea in a meaningful and considerate way. And the reason for this is quite simple. Video games are first and foremost games, and as such rely on systems, goals, and challenges to entertain and sustain interest in the player. Gameplay is the single most important factor, and if a game isn't fun to play, then it has failed wholeheartedly. And so understandably, game designers and creators focus on getting this aspect as perfect as possible over other elements. This isn't to say that video games haven't made major advancements in regards to their storytelling capabilities. Indeed, some of the best stories of our generation have been told through video games. However, such games are few and far between. Most still suffer from their inability to express themselves in ways wholly unique to the medium. Take The Last of Us, for example, largely considered to be one of the finest achievements in video game storytelling. Its two leads, Joel and Ellie, are very compelling and multi-dimensional characters, and their journey and growth together is the emotional driving force of the game and its story. But when you really think about it, does any of that have anything to do with the actual game? The parts where you are sneaking around clickers and taking out dangerous bandits. A person could sit down and watch The Last of Us with all the gameplay bits removed and be just as emotionally engaged as a player. Gameplay and story are two separate entities, disconnected from each other. The game has to stop at various instances to tell its story in a more traditional and cinematic way. And this is largely the way most video games have been doing things for a long time. There is the game and there is the story surrounding the game, which provides context for why the player has to get from A to B. Thankfully, there have been exceptions to this trend, and one of the most notable recent examples is the critically lauded PlayStation exclusive Journey. A spiritual follow-up to Flow and Flower, Journey continues and further refines development developer that game company's core design philosophy of provoking an emotional reaction from the player. In Journey, you play as a mysterious robed individual on a mission to reach the top of a massive mountain looming in the distance. As you make your way across the endless desert, perhaps even running into some fellow travelers along the way, you explore the ruins of a lost civilization while growing your scarf, which helps you fly and more easily traverse the environment. But Journey isn't really about its plot. In fact, what is there has been done before, and exploring ancient ruins is a common narrative device in video games. But it is used more effectively here than in almost every other similarly structured game, and that's because it serves not just to tell a story, but to contribute and contextualize the overall themes and feelings the game is meant to provoke in the player. As its name suggests, Journey is about the voyage of life from its beginning all the way to its end, its ups and downs, and who we encounter along the way. And while most games would make this theme explicit through a straightforward story, characters, and dialogue, Journey has none of that, and instead expresses itself in a way only video games can, through game design. The game begins with you alone in a desert, and this first level is used mostly to teach you how to play. You are isolated and drawn in by the mysterious nature of the world you are exploring, and you are limited in what you can experience. Upon moving onto the second level, suddenly the world opens up. There is a lot more space to explore and various secrets to find, and once you are ready to move on, a bridge creates a clear path forward. While there is more room to explore, you are still being guided forward, and making progress is easygoing and effortless. However, it is after this that the game really expands. You are given a desert significantly larger in size to explore. So massive in scope is this level compared to the others that the path forward feels daunting and intimidating. The atmosphere is calm and easygoing, but with a hint of uncertainty, and for the first time you're kind of unsure what to do or where to go. While still being guided by the flying carpets, you have to rely a bit more on yourself to figure things out and uncover all the mysteries. The next level is when things get really fun. The atmosphere immediately changes, becoming jovial and carefree. Almost the entire level consists of you surfing and sliding down hills of sand without a care in the world. It's beautiful, adventurous, and full of wonder. But that wonder is fleeting, as suddenly you are dropped into the abyss of a dark and ominous cavern. All the euphoric bliss you had been experiencing is abruptly changed into dread. Dread for what lies ahead and what you were leaving behind. Upon entering the tunnels, the journey becomes dangerous. You are met with a dark, foreboding, threatening atmosphere, and for the first time you have to evade massive flying machines called guardians that will attack you if spotted. If this happens, the length of your scarf will be reduced, taking away some of your progress, thus making maneuverability more difficult. There is also a noticeable shift towards upward mobility as you use the seaweed and jellyfish-esque cloth creatures to push towards the top. It ends with a thrillingly tense descent into the next stage, which is even more vertically designed. Here you have to find glyphs and activate them to raise the water level, allowing you to quickly rise to the top. The end is fastly approaching at this point, and before you know it, you're at the base of the mountain, where you are faced with strong, overwhelmingly cold winds that drain the power of your scarf, forcing you to slowly trudge forward. There are more guardians to evade, and the closer you get, the weaker you become. You are cold and tired and desperate, and despite pushing forward with all your might, you collapse in the snow. Death is certain. But then 6 white-robed figures seemingly revive you to full power, and you ascend to the peak of the mountain. You fly like a feather floating in the wind, higher and higher, and the experience is heavenly and rapturous. You finally reach the peak, the end of your journey. A star appears to shoot forth from the peak, viewed by the next traveler attempting to make the same journey. It really is an incredible gaming experience that words can't do justice, and the reason for that can be attributed to the way the levels are designed and ordered. Each level is a stage of life, reflecting the distinct feelings and emotions associated with that stage. The early levels are full of wonder, mystery, exploration, and joy, reflecting the innocence of childhood. The descent into the tunnels recall the feelings of anxiety and uncertainty we all feel when childhood leaves us and the responsibility of adulthood comes knocking, while the ascent up the temple represents the quickening of time as it passes us by, pushing us closer to our inevitable death, which you face head-on while traversing up the cold mountain slopes. You slow down, everything becomes harder, and eventually you die, and upon your death, you ascend to the heavens, where everything is more glorious and transcendental. It even ends with you walking into the light, while another begins the journey right behind you. And the true beauty of all this is that it is expressed without a single word of dialogue or explicit plot points, just pure game design aided by phenomenal visuals and an unforgettably gorgeous soundtrack. It's what that game company does so well and makes their games truly special. No matter who you are or where you come from, Journey is able to emotionally provoke just about anyone. But it doesn't end there. Journey has a multiplayer component that adds even more subtext to the experience. When you encounter another player, their username is never revealed, and you can't interact through voice chat. Instead, you are forced to communicate through simple sound cues, and instead of being a liability like you might think, these restrictions actually enhance the bond you forge with a total stranger. There's no ability to troll or ruin the experience for another player, and without the preconception of gender, nationality, or religion, you and your companion are free to interact on the game's terms. It's oddly liberating, and you will find yourself genuinely caring about the other player. You'll play little musical games with each other using the sound cues. You'll want to stick by their side and make sure they find the same secrets you did, and when you see them take a hit, you want to rush to them and see if they are okay. Even more brilliant is that you aren't even guaranteed to play through with the same person, or even with anyone at all. Some playthroughs you'll be alone, others you'll make it all the way through with one partner, and others with multiple partners. This multiplayer is elegant in its simplicity, and further adds to Journey's artistic expression. And when you finally discover all the secrets Journey has to offer, it rewards you with a white robe that acts to differentiate you from other players, adding even more subtext to the multiplayer. The white robe signifies those who have mastered the game, and both encountering and playing as a white-robed character contextually feels different, almost like you get to be a guardian angel guiding a younger, more inexperienced traveler on their journey. All this means is that there's a ton of replay value. Its short length makes Journey an easy game to sit down and play in one sitting. With its relentless multiplayer design, no experience is ever exactly the same. All this should serve to highlight just why Journey is such a significant and important game. Through the workings of all its design elements, it's capable of making you feel awe, wonder, optimism, isolation, fear, and loneliness. And should you run through the game with another player, you'll experience these feelings with a total stranger and even grow to care about them despite never saying a word to each other. All of these feelings and emotions the game is able to mine from the player creates a microcosmic experience of life itself, and it comes from the game mechanics that game company expertly crafted to achieve this effect. It is no accident. It is purposeful and deliberate game design meant to express an idea in a way only a video game can, and it is for this reason that it remains one of the quintessential examples of the artistic merit of the medium, and a model of what video games are truly capable of achieving. So those are my thoughts on Journey. I know it's an older game, but it's special and still worth diving into after all this time. If you have played Journey, please let me know how it
Here's
made
what
you
this
feel in
one.
the comments.
I only have 5 minutes. I think I only need 5 minutes to finish it.
So you may have heard, a new Mass Effect has finally arrived. Mass Effect Andromeda is here, and if you've been paying attention to the reactions, then you know that it doesn't look pretty. Reports of graphical glitches, a poor user interface, boring side quests, uninspired and hackneyed writing, and poor animations are all painting Mass Effect Andromeda in an extremely poor light. But I'm not here to talk about these issues or the game, as I have not played it myself, though I plan to. Instead, I'd like to focus a bit on the context and overall reactions surrounding the game itself, because frankly, I find it both fascinating and disheartening. Never in my life have I ever seen such a high-profile game get savaged in the way Andromeda currently is, leading up to its release. Wherever you go, there is this pervasive atmosphere of outrage and skepticism. Now, I'm not here to try to convince you that the feelings you have, whether positive or negative, are valid. That's not my place. In fact, I agree with nearly all of the criticisms I've been seeing and hearing. The facial animations do look bad, there's simply no denying that, but I am concerned with the sheer vitriolic negativity the game is getting before most have even played it. Let's back up a bit, though. The truth is that the Mass Effect franchise has remained in a very trepidatious place ever since the conclusion of the original trilogy. Never in video game history has the ending of a game rocked its fanbase like Mass Effect 3 did, and that's because to many, Mass Effect is more than just a video game. Over the course of the 3 games, it introduced and developed what many consider to be one of the best science fiction universes of the modern age. The world building and character writing felt real, a feeling amplified by the participatory nature of the game. Mass Effect wasn't just a story you watched, it was a story you engaged with on a deep emotional level. Since Shepard was practically a blank slate, a player is able to project their own feelings and emotional baggage onto him or her, deepening the affection you felt to the fictional supporting characters. These games were incredibly easy to get lost in many ways it could feel like a second life, and the fans loved it. But love and hate are two sides of the same coin, and can flip at any moment, and that is exactly what happened when Mass Effect 3 ended the way it did. This explains the sheer intensity Bioware felt from the negative reaction of the fanbase. Many felt that this thing they loved had betrayed them, which is an understandable, if not ultimately immature stance to take. But many did anyway, and both Mass Effect and Bioware have yet to fully recover from this perception. Whereas Bioware was once a developer that could do no wrong, now they are perceived to be fools who can do nothing right. The culture surrounding Bioware was poisoned, and in many ways still remains so, hence the current reaction to Andromeda, which already comes with the baggage left over from the original trilogy. Whether deserved or not, the odds were already stacked against this game. All this is to say that I understand where all the skepticism for Andromeda is coming from. Healthy skepticism is good. It keeps our expectations tempered, which is a lesson we all should have learned after Mass Effect 3. But that's not what I'm seeing with much of the criticism surrounding Andromeda. What I'm seeing is precise, often mean-spirited attacks and comments against the game and BioWare. The amount of memes, hyperbolic statements, and even misguided witch hunts that have sprouted up indicates that toxic cynicism still pervades much of the fandom after all these years. This isn't helped by the constant feedback loops the internet provides people with. I can't tell you how many variations of the same memes and videos making fun of Andromeda's animations I've seen. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for making fun. I've had some pretty good laughs at these myself. How can you not when seeing some of those facial expressions? But it gets old fast. It's honestly starting to feel like kicking a guy when he's down. Look, I know there are legitimate reasons why Andromeda is getting such a lukewarm reception. The Mass Effect games come with a strong pedigree, and falling below those standards, even a little, means a lot with this franchise. But the constant spotlighting of the flaws is taking away from the good things people are saying about it, which simply isn't fair, especially when some of the flaws are minor compared to others. And let's be real, it's not like weird and hilarious technical issues are anything new to big RPGs, or even new to Mass Effect. Am I the only one who remembers the horrendously long texture load-ins from the first Mass Effect? It just seems like people are willing to put up with less when it comes to present-day BioWare, holding them to a higher standard than other developers, and maybe they should be considering the high quality of their past games. However, without painting with too broad a stroke, it honestly feels like a portion of gamers actually want BioWare and Mass Effect to fail. We should be rooting for their success, not failure. I feel like many are forgetting that there are people behind this game. Collectively, they put thousands of hours of their lives into making it, and while that doesn't mean they should be shielded from criticism, it should be constructive and respectful. Yet so often rarely is these days when aided by the anonymity of the internet. Make no mistake, I'm not attempting to defend the flaws of Andromeda or apologize on behalf of BioWare, but the tribalism forming on both sides of the argument, fed through and intensified by the echo chamber and clickbait marketplace of the internet, is no good for anyone, least of all the game. Mass Effect Andromeda deserves to be analyzed as objectively as much as any other game, both as a separate work itself and as a continuation of the franchise. People just need to be honest with themselves and stop trying to filter a narrative through other people's opinions. Ultimately, you are the only one who can decide whether Mass Effect Andromeda is worth your time and money or not. For some, the technical issues and lesser quality storytelling is enough to turn them off from a purchase, and that's perfectly okay. For others, these are minor issues that won't matter as long as the game is an entertaining experience, and that's okay too. If Mass Effect has taught us anything, it's that collective hive mind thinking is terrible for everyone, especially the individual. So think for yourself and have fun, not just with video games, but with everything you do. So if you've played Andromeda, or even if you haven't but have something to say, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I am looking forward to playing Andromeda for myself, just out of pure curiosity, and I'm sure I will be sharing my opinions regarding it in the future. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, please rate and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and maybe I'll see you in the Andromeda Galaxy.
What is fun?
Genius. Just go straight across. What's up, everyone? It's Rui. I don't know why I decided to start the video like that today. I feel like that was a bad intro. Y'all saw the title already. Today is a Blender day. I've been working on functionality type stuff for my minigame for a few days now, and getting a little tired of it, so we're gonna take a break by working on the more pretty, fun, whimsical, cosmetic things for the game. Specifically, I have two categories of things that I want to work on. I need a 3D model for my player character. I've had a capsule as a placeholder for a while now, so it's time to replace that buddy. And the other thing is, this is supposed to be a leaf picking up type game, but there are no leaves yet, so we need to model some leaves as well, which I'm super excited about because I feel like that's really gonna bring the whole game together. But before getting started on all that Blender stuff, I have some unfortunate news to deliver, which is that my string lights, they don't work anymore. They're dead. No. Fly high. I replaced the batteries and everything. It's not a battery issue. I think the battery compartment and other stuff, maybe it like rusted or something. I don't know, but I'm gonna replace it. And it's such a shame because you guys saw me meticulously putting together all of this DIY style. So I do feel a bit sentimental about it. But I do need some functional string lights. It's crazy how much more reading I get done when my string lights are on. It like genuinely just puts me in the mindset for wanting to read. And I do need to get some reading done because I have a library book that needs to get returned soon and I'm not even halfway through it. And I've already renewed my checkout once and I don't want to have to renew it again. So let me get that done after a quick sip. Okay, let me use some tape. I just go straight across. Okay, yeah, you know what? This works. Now I just have to take down the old one. R.I.P. You will be missed. I don't know why I didn't take this down before I put up the new one. Kinda makes it harder. Yay, they're pretty cute. They cast a very cool, almost snowflake-like light pattern on the wall. Okay, this battery compartment is too much of an eyesore for me. I don't know that that's much better, but we're sticking with it. Lemon ginger is where it's at. Before I start 3D modeling my player character in Blender, I'm going to put together a few reference photos and I'll use those as a template in Blender to shape my character's shape around. I know that the general advice about game dev best practices is to get all the functionality working first, and then you worry about it looking right and looking pretty at the very end. But as of now, I'm liking this flow of just going back and forth between working on functionality and then working on the more cosmetic aspects. That way, if I start getting sick of working on the code side, then I can flip over to drawing my reference photos or modeling things in Blender. And then once I get kind of sick of that, or I feel like I need some fresh eyes, I can go back to the code. This is just the benefit of working on something just for yourself, solo project. You can do it whatever way you want. Even the solo dev behind Stardew Valley, which is like the solo developer indie success story that like all indie game devs look up to, he's talked about kind of going back and forth between working on art and working on code. His favorite part of developing a game is not the code, but the art. And it's kind of the same for me. Bringing together the look and feel is just very fulfilling for me. So it just feels kind of very drab for me, honestly, when I'm working on a game and everything is just like boxes and placeholders. So yeah, I've just been really enjoying just making time throughout the whole development process for thinking about and bringing to life the like visual elements that really excite me and motivate me about the game. That's just what really helps me get through it, at least as of right now. Especially when it comes to self-learning a skill, I've realized that it's very useful to find a way of learning that is satisfying to you. For some people, they get a lot of satisfaction out of optimizing and figuring out how to do things more efficiently and with more polish. For me, I'd say my learning archetype is kind of like the cat. I like to just go and knock things over and see what happens. I wonder what the difference is between a sphere and a subdivision cube. Let's see. Oh yeah, the top looks so different. Now I see why the subdivided cube is better. And these styles aren't mutually exclusive. Like in the beginning, I like to just throw things together to see the big picture. But I do also find the joy of bit by bit over time, just zooming in on each part and polishing up my technique. Look at me using hotkeys. What's a good way to do this? Let me think. Okay. Whew. Okay, I'm done for today. I'm happy with how things turned out. I've just never made anything like this before, so it was a bit of a struggle, but it was worth it. So cute. I love the hat. Also, these string lights just look so beautiful at night. Like the snowflake-like pattern that they cast on the wall. It has a very wintry, Christmassy vibe. Guys, I started a new anime last night. It's called The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity. It's a romance anime. It's kind of corny, but it's cute, so I'm gonna keep watching it. Also, it like takes place in a cake shop, and let me tell you, I was hungry watching that. It's my first anime that I've watched in a while. The anime itself is not anything super different or new. There are a lot of themes from other romance anime that I watched when I was younger, and so I feel like I'm kind of watching for a bit of the nostalgia factor, since it reminds me of the anime I watched growing up. I also think that Kimi ni Todoke from Me to You, which is my all-time favorite anime, just kind of spoiled all romance anime ever for me, because it's just too perfect. And the writing is just so intricate and the emotions feel so real. But anyways, we have a character to finish modeling. Let's dive back in. I can't believe just how long I spent yesterday solely on the hat. But like, this is why, in my first minigame, my character was just bald, because I was just very intimidated by the process of making hair or a hat. So I'm glad that I finally built up the courage to dip my toes into that. And you know what? Now I have a better sense of what it entails. All that's left to model now is the basket, and then after that we can move on from the modeling. I'm a genius. Cute? Oh, it's kind of short.
Alright, chat. I'm gonna make a solid to-do list to do later on a later stream. So I'm gonna end before this next ad goes. So we're going to do episode 5.5 tonight instead of playing games. So I will see you all later tonight. Okay, bye-bye.